An 11-year-old black girl stands in the aisle of a first-class cabin, her boarding pass trembling slightly in her small hand. Across from her, a white businessman twice her size smirks down at her, his expensive suit pressed his entitlement, radiating like heat. "This seat is mine, sweetheart," he says, voice dripping with condescension. "Why don't you run along back to economy where you belong?" Gasps echo through the cabin. Phones rise, cameras start recording. What happens next will ground an entire flight, destroy careers, and gen the world. But before we get there, I need you to stay with me until the very end of this story. And please comment below with the city you're watching from, so I can see just how far this story travels. Now let me take you back to where it all began. The Los Angeles sun blazed mercilessly through the floor-to-ceiling windows of LAX Terminal 7, casting long golden bars across the polished marble floors. Travelers moved in practiced choreography. Businessmen with their leather briefcases. Families corralling restless children, tourists fumbling with oversized luggage. The air smelled of expensive coffee cinnamon rolls from the terminal bakery, and that peculiar airport mixture of jet fuel and possibility. Caroline Williams moved through this chaos like a swan gliding across still water. At 11 years old, she stood 4 feet 9 inches tall, her posture so perfect it would make ballet instructors weep with joy. Her hair was gathered into 2 neat Bantu knots, each one meticulously twisted by her own skilled fingers that morning. She wore a navy blue blazer over a crisp white shirt, gray slacks with a knife-edge crease, and patent leather shoes that caught the light with each measured step. A small carry-on suitcase rolled behind her, its wheels barely making a sound. She didn't look like most 11-year-olds. She looked like someone who understood that presentation mattered, that respect was something you commanded through dignity rather than demanded through volume. "Gate 42B," she murmured to herself, checking the departure board with dark eyes that missed nothing. Her flight to New York, a cross-country journey she'd made dozens of times before, would board in 20 minutes. Caroline joined the priority boarding line, her first-class ticket displayed on her phone screen. Around her, other passengers clutched their devices, their carry-on bags stuffed with neck pillows and magazines. A woman in a business suit spoke urgently into her Bluetooth headset about quarterly projections. 2 gates over a family argued about whether they'd packed someone's iPad. Normal airport chaos, normal Tuesday morning. Caroline had no idea she was about to step into anything but normal. The gate agent, a tired-looking woman named Patricia with reading glasses dangling from a beaded chain, began the boarding announcement. "Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. We'll now begin boarding Flight 2847 with non-stop service to New York JFK. At this time, we'd like to welcome our first-class passengers and those requiring additional assistance." Caroline stepped forward, her boarding pass ready. Patricia scanned it without really looking up, the little machine beeping its approval. "Seat 2A, sweetie. Straight down the jetway, first left when you board. Have a wonderful flight." "Thank you," Caroline said, her voice clear and polite. The jetway smelled like recycled air and industrial carpet cleaner. Caroline's footsteps echoed slightly in the enclosed space as she made her way down the slight incline. At the aircraft door, a flight attendant stood, greeting passengers. A woman in her mid-40s, with bleached blonde hair, pulled back so tightly it looked painful, her smile professional, but not reaching her eyes. Her name tag read, Brenda. "Welcome aboard," Brenda said automatically. Then her gaze dropped to Caroline. The smile flickered something unreadable, passing across her face. "Are you traveling alone?" "Yes, ma'am," Caroline replied. "Seat 2A. Brenda's lips pressed together. "Well, go ahead then." Caroline entered the first-class cabin, and for a moment she allowed herself to appreciate it. The seats were wide and plush, upholstered in cream-colored leather. The overhead bins gleamed. Small screens were embedded in each seatback, promising entertainment and connectivity at 37,000 feet. The lighting was warm and welcoming, designed to make passengers feel less like they were in a metal tube hurtling through the atmosphere and more like they were in an exclusive lounge. Seat 2A was a window seat in the second row. Caroline moved toward it, her small suitcase rolling behind her with barely a whisper of sound. That's when she saw him. A man sat in her seat. A white man who looked to be in his early 50s with silver-streaked dark hair, styled with too much gel, a navy suit that probably cost more than most people's monthly rent, and a gold Rolex that caught the cabin light like a warning beacon. He had a laptop open on the tray table, fingers moving across the keyboard, with the aggressive confidence of someone used to being important. Caroline stopped beside him, polite but firm. "Excuse me, sir. I think you're in my seat." The man didn't look up. His fingers kept typing. "No, I'm not." The words hung in the air between them like smoke. Caroline felt her stomach tighten, but her voice remained steady. "Sir, I have seat 2A. That's the seat you're sitting in." Now he looked up. His eyes cold, pale blue, like chips of Arctic ice swept over her from head to toe. His gaze lingered on her face, traveled down to her carefully chosen clothes, then dismissed her entirely in the span of 2 seconds. When he spoke, his voice carried the kind of casual cruelty that comes from years of never being challenged. "Listen, sweetheart. I don't know what game you're playing, but this is first class. The economy cabin is back there." He jerked his thumb toward the rear of the plane without looking. "I'm sure you'll be much more comfortable back there. Near the bathrooms, probably." The words landed like a slap. Caroline's hand tightened on her phone, but her expression didn't change. "Sir, I have a first-class ticket, seat 2A. You're sitting in it." Several other passengers had boarded and were now shuffling past, their conversations faltering as they registered the confrontation. A woman in her 30s with designer luggage paused, her eyes darting between Caroline and the man. 2 rows back, an elderly gentleman in a cardigan settled into his seat, his attention caught. The man in seat 2A sighed dramatically, the kind of exaggerated exhale that said he was being extraordinarily patient with someone too stupid to understand basic reality. "Look, little girl. My name is Caroline." The interruption was quiet but sharp as a knife. The man's eyebrows rose. Around them, more passengers were stopping now, the flow of boarding traffic creating a small bottleneck in the aisle. Phones appeared held low, but with cameras definitely active. In the age of viral videos, everyone sensed when something worth recording was about to happen. "Excuse me?" The man's voice carried a dangerous edge now. "You called me little girl. My name is Caroline Williams." She kept her tone perfectly respectful, perfectly calm, but there was steel underneath it. "And sir, with all due respect, you are sitting in my assigned seat. I'm not trying to cause any trouble. I just need you to check your boarding pass." For a moment, just a fraction of a second, something like uncertainty flickered across the man's face. Then it hardened back into condescending confidence. "I don't need to check anything," he said, his voice rising slightly. "I always sit in first class. I fly this route twice a month. I know where my seat is." "Then you should have no problem showing me your boarding pass," Caroline said, her voice maddeningly reasonable. The man's face flushed red. "I don't have to show you anything. Who the hell do you think you are?" "A passenger with an assigned seat," Caroline replied. "Sir, I'm asking nicely. Please check your ticket." "And I'm telling you, you're in the wrong cabin." He turned back to his laptop, dismissing her. "Now run along before I call the flight attendant and have you removed for harassment." The word harassment, coming from a grown man sitting in an 11-year-old's seat, was so absurd that several passengers made audible sounds of disbelief. The woman with designer luggage muttered something that sounded like, "Are you kidding me?" Caroline took a slow breath. She'd encountered prejudice before, subtle and blatant, the kind that came with being a young black girl in spaces where people didn't expect to see her. Her father had prepared her for this. Her mother, before she'd passed away 3 years ago, had armed her with both grace and backbone. "I'll call the flight attendant myself," Caroline said calmly. She pressed the call button above the seat, her seat, and within seconds, Brenda appeared from the galley, her professional smile already in place. "Yes. What seems to be the problem?" Caroline opened her mouth to explain, but the man beat her to it. "This child claims I'm in her seat," he said, managing to sound both amused and exasperated. I tried to explain that she's confused, but she's being quite insistent. I think there's been some mistake with her ticket, probably meant for economy, but got mixed up somehow. He gave Brenda a conspiratorial look, one professional to another, the kind that said you understand how these things happen. Brenda's gaze shifted to Caroline, and something in her expression made Caroline's chest tighten. It was subtle, just a slight tightening around the eyes, a barely perceptible downward twitch of her mouth. But it was there. Judgment, assumption, bias wrapped in the uniform of authority. "Sweetheart," Brenda said, her voice dripping with false kindness. "Can I see your boarding pass?" Caroline held up her phone, the screen displaying her mobile boarding pass, clearly Seat 2A. First class, Williams Caroline. Brenda glanced at it, then looked back at the man. "And sir, your boarding pass." "It's in my briefcase," he said, waving vaguely at the overhead bin. "But really, this is ridiculous. I've been flying with this airline for 15 years. I'm a platinum member. Are you seriously questioning me because of some kid who probably can't even read her ticket correctly?" Several gasps rippled through the cabin. "Sir," Caroline said, her voice quiet but firm, "I can definitely read. And my ticket clearly says Seat 2A. "Look," the man said, turning to face her fully now. His voice dropped lower, harder, laced with barely concealed contempt. "I don't know who bought you that ticket. Maybe some scholarship program, maybe some diversity initiative, but you need to understand something. People like me, we belong here." He gestured around the first-class cabin. "This is where business gets done, where important people sit. You're just a kid. You don't belong here." The cabin went absolutely silent. Even Brenda looked uncomfortable now, though Caroline noticed she still hadn't asked the man to actually produce his boarding pass. "Sir," Caroline began. "No." He cut her off. "I've been polite enough. I've been patient. But I'm done entertaining this nonsense. I'm not moving. If you have a problem with that, take it up with someone else. Preferably someone back in economy where they're used to dealing with situations like this." The pause before "situations like this" was loaded with everything he wasn't quite saying out loud. Everything he didn't have to say out loud, because everyone in earshot knew exactly what he meant. Caroline felt something hot and sharp twist in her chest, but she kept her face perfectly composed. Her mother's voice echoed in her memory. "They'll try to make you small baby. They'll try to make you doubt yourself. Don't give them that power. Stand tall, stand dignified, and never ever let them see you break." "Ma'am," Caroline said, turning to Brenda, "I'm asking you as a flight attendant to resolve this situation. This gentleman is in my assigned seat. I've shown you my boarding pass. I've been nothing but polite. I'm asking him to simply show his ticket to prove he's in the right seat. That's all." Brenda shifted her weight, clearly uncomfortable, but also clearly having made up her mind about something. "Sir, would you mind just showing your boarding pass, just to clear this up?" "I mind very much," the man snapped. "I'm not going to be interrogated by a child and a flight attendant because you people can't figure out your own seating system. Maybe if you spent less time on diversity quotas and more time on basic customer service, we wouldn't be having this problem." Another passenger, a young black woman in row 3, stood up suddenly. "Are you serious right now? She's a child, and she showed her ticket. Why won't you show yours?" "Sit down," the man said without looking at her. "This doesn't concern you." "It concerns all of us," said the elderly gentleman in the cardigan. "If you're in the right seat, simply show your pass and end this." More phones were definitely recording now. Caroline could see at least 5 cameras pointed at them, could hear the telltale digital shutter sounds of people taking photos. The man's jaw clenched. "I don't have to prove anything to any of you, sir," Brenda said, her voice taking on a sharper edge. "I'm going to need you to either show your boarding pass or what?" He stood up suddenly, his full height towering over both Caroline and Brenda. "Are you threatening me? Do you know who I am? I'm Robert Henderson. I run Henderson Financial Consulting. I do more business with this airline in a month than most of you will see in your entire lives. I could have you fired with a single phone call." Caroline's mind cataloged the name automatically. Robert Henderson. She filed it away. Nobody's threatening anyone, Brenda said, though Caroline noticed she'd taken a small step back. I just need to verify seating assignments. Then verify hers. Henderson snapped, jabbing a finger toward Caroline. She's the one making accusations. I was sitting here perfectly peacefully before she showed up claiming... I'm not claiming anything. Caroline interrupted quietly. I'm stating a fact. You're in my seat. Henderson's face went from red to purple. That's it. I want her removed from this flight. Now. I don't care what her ticket says. I'm not sitting near someone who's going to cause problems the entire flight. I'm certainly not going to be harassed by some... He stopped himself. But everyone heard what he'd almost said. Everyone heard the word he'd bitten back at the last second. The cabin was so quiet now you could hear the ventilation system humming. Caroline looked up at him, her 11-year-old face calm, her eyes steady. You were saying, Mr. Henderson... His hands clenched into fists at his sides. Get off this plane. No, Caroline said softly. What did you say? I said no. Caroline's voice was perfectly level. I have a ticket. I have an assigned seat this seat. I've broken no rules. I've been nothing but respectful. I'm not going anywhere. Henderson turned to Brenda. You heard her. She's refusing to comply with crew instructions. That's a federal offense. Have security remove her. Brenda's face cycled through several expressions: discomfort, uncertainty, and then, troublingly, resignation. Sweetheart, she said to Caroline, maybe it would be easier if you just took another seat. We have other first-class seats available. We can move you to... Why should she move? The young black woman from row 3 demanded. She has a ticket for this seat. Why doesn't he have to move? Better yet? Why doesn't he have to show his ticket? Ma'am, please, Brenda said. I'm trying to de-escalate the situation. By punishing the person who did nothing wrong. The woman crossed her arms. That's interesting. Look, Henderson said, his voice taking on a dangerous calm. I don't know what kind of stunt this is. Maybe she's recording for social media. Maybe this is some kind of race-baiting setup, but I'm done participating. Either she goes, or I call my lawyer, and the airline can deal with a lawsuit for allowing passengers to be harassed by children playing pretend. Playing pretend. Caroline's voice finally carried a hint of emotion. Not anger, but something sharper. Something that made several nearby passengers lean forward. Sir, I'm not playing anything. And I think you should be very, very careful about how you proceed from here. Henderson laughed a harsh, ugly sound. Is that a threat? Did this child just threaten me? It's not a threat, Caroline said quietly. It's advice. Oh, really? And what exactly do you think you're going to do to me? Little girl, call your mom. Tell your teacher. Post something on TikTok. He sneered. I've dealt with protesters, journalists, and corporate lawyers. You think an 11-year-old girl scares me? No, Caroline said. I don't think I scare you at all. I think that's the problem. Something in her tone made Brenda pause, made Henderson hesitate for just a fraction of a second. But then his arrogance reasserted itself. That's it. I'm calling the captain. If you won't remove her, I will. He reached up to press the call button, but another flight attendant, a younger man with kind eyes, appeared from the galley. What's going on? He asked. James, Brenda said, relief flooding her voice. We have a seating dispute. James looked at Caroline, then at Henderson, then at the crowd of passengers, all watching with phones raised. Okay, he said carefully. Let's sort this out. Miss, can I see your boarding pass? Caroline showed it to him. Seat 2A, first class. James read aloud. Then he turned to Henderson. And sir, your boarding pass. I don't have it handy, Henderson said through gritted teeth. Could you get it, please? James's voice was professional, but firm. I could. Henderson said, but I'm not going to. This is absurd. I'm not going to be treated like a criminal because... Nobody said you're a criminal, sir, James interrupted. But all passengers need to be in their assigned seats. If this is your seat, your boarding pass will show that. Simple as that. Henderson's eyes narrowed. I want your name and employee number, both of you. When I report this incident to your supervisors, you're welcome to do that, James said calmly, after you show me your boarding pass. The standoff stretched for long seconds. Finally, with a curse under his breath, Henderson reached into the overhead bin and pulled down a leather briefcase. He rifled through it aggressively, papers fluttering, his movements growing more frantic as seconds passed. Caroline watched silently. Around them, passengers whispered. Cameras kept recording. The moment stretched taut as a wire. Well, James said. Henderson's face had gone from purple to ashen. There must be... I definitely... He trailed off, staring at a piece of paper in his hand. Sir, James prompted. My seat is... Henderson's voice came out strangled. My seat is 5C. The cabin erupted. Gasps, exclamations, a few outright laughs of disbelief. The young black woman in row 3 said, "Oh my God," loud enough to carry 3 rows. The elderly gentleman shook his head sadly. Multiple passengers were talking now, their voices overlapping. He was in the wrong seat the whole time. Did you hear what he said to her? That poor child. He was so sure. The racism, my God. Henderson stood frozen, his boarding pass hanging limply from his fingers. Seat 5C, first class. Henderson Robert, not seat 2A, not even close. James turned to Caroline, his expression gentle. I'm so sorry for this, miss. Would you like to take your seat now? Yes, please, Caroline said softly. But as she moved forward, Henderson didn't move. He stood there blocking the way, his face a mask of humiliated fury. Sir, James said, you need to move to your assigned seat. This is... Henderson seemed to be struggling to form words. This is a setup, she knew. Someone told her. This was planned. Sir, James said, his patience clearly wearing thin. You were sitting in someone else's seat, a child's seat. You refused to check your boarding pass when asked. You made racist implications and threats. The only setup here was your own assumptions. Now please move to seat 5C so this young lady can sit down and we can complete boarding. Henderson's hands shook slightly. He looked at Caroline, really looked at her for the first time, and she met his gaze steadily. I could have you arrested. Henderson set his voice low and vicious. For defamation. For harassment. For what? Caroline asked quietly. For asking you to show your ticket, for proving you were wrong. You embarrassed me. No, sir, Caroline said, and now there was steel in her voice, clear and unmistakable. You embarrassed yourself. All I did was ask to sit in my assigned seat. Everything that happened after that was your choice. Around them, passengers broke into spontaneous applause. Henderson's face went through several colors. Then, without another word, he grabbed his laptop and briefcase and shoved past Caroline toward seat 5C 3 rows back and across the aisle. Caroline calmly placed her carry-on in the overhead bin, then settled into seat 2A, her seat with the grace of someone who'd never doubted she belonged there. James leaned down. Are you okay? I'm fine, Caroline said. Thank you for listening. Of course. Again, I'm so sorry you had to experience that. Caroline nodded, but she was already pulling out her tablet, her face composed. To anyone watching, she seemed completely unruffled, just another passenger preparing for a routine flight. But inside, her heart hammered. Her hands wanted to shake. The adrenaline of standing her ground against an adult man twice her size, against assumptions and prejudices, and the weight of being questioned in a space where she had every right to be, it all crashed over her now that the confrontation had passed. She took slow, steady breaths. Her mother's voice. Let them underestimate you, baby. Let them think you're just a child. And then show them exactly who you are. Boarding continued around her. More passengers filed in, many of them glancing her way with expressions ranging from sympathy to admiration. The young black woman from row 3 caught her eye and gave her a discreet thumbs up. Caroline managed a small smile in return. In seat 5C, Henderson had his phone out, typing furiously. His jaw was clenched so tight, Caroline could see the muscles jumping. Brenda had disappeared, fled to the galley probably. James was helping other passengers with their luggage, professional and calm, as if nothing had happened. But something had happened. As Caroline buckled her seatbelt and adjusted her seat, she thought about what her father would say when she told him about this. David Williams didn't tolerate disrespect toward his daughter, toward anyone really, but especially his daughter. Her father, who'd built Williams Technologies from a garage startup into a multinational tech empire worth billions. Her father, who'd taught her that dignity was non-negotiable and that standing up for yourself was never wrong, even when it was hard. Especially when it was hard. The captain's voice crackled over the intercom. "Good morning, folks. This is Captain Mitchell. We're just finishing up our pre-flight checks and should be pushing back from the gate in about 10 minutes. Flight time to JFK will be approximately 5 hours and 40 minutes. Caroline let the familiar words wash over her. She'd flown this route dozens of times. She knew the routine. Pushback taxi to the runway, the powerful surge of takeoff, the climb to cruising altitude, pretzels and ginger ale. 5 hours suspended between Los Angeles and New York, the country spreading out below like a map. Routine. Except it wasn't routine. Not today. Because 3 rows back Robert Henderson was still typing on his phone, his face twisted with rage. And across the aisle, Brenda had emerged from the galley and was whispering urgently with another flight attendant, both of them shooting glances toward Caroline. Something prickled at the back of Caroline's neck. An instinct honed by being her father's daughter, by growing up in boardrooms and corporate strategy sessions, by learning to read people the way others read books. This wasn't over. The thought had barely formed when Brenda approached her seat again. But this time she wasn't alone. The head flight attendant, an older woman with severe features and iron gray hair, pulled into a bun, walked beside her, her expression stern. "Miss Williams." The head attendant said her name tag reading Margaret. "I need to speak with you." Caroline looked up. "Yes, ma'am. There's been a complaint filed against you." The words dropped like stones into water. "A complaint," Caroline said carefully. "Yes, Mr. Henderson has stated that you were verbally aggressive toward him, that you deliberately caused a scene, and that you made him feel unsafe." Margaret's face was impassive. "He's requesting that you be removed from the flight." For a moment, Caroline couldn't breathe. Around them, passengers who'd witnessed the entire confrontation erupted in protest. That's not what happened. She didn't do anything. He was in her seat. This is insane. Margaret held up a hand. "I understand there was a seating dispute. However, when a passenger files a formal complaint citing safety concerns, we have to take it seriously." Safety concerns. Caroline's voice came out smaller than she wanted. "I'm 11 years old. I'm 4 feet 9 inches tall. I weigh 87 pounds. What safety concern could I possibly pose?" "It's not about physical safety," Margaret said, though her tone suggested even she found this ridiculous. "It's about emotional comfort and, oh, come on," the young black woman from row 3 said, standing up again. "Are you actually going to remove a child from a flight because some racist man lied about her after being caught in his lie?" "Ma'am, please sit down," Margaret said. "I will not sit down. I recorded the entire thing. So did at least 5 other passengers." She was polite, respectful, and simply asked for her assigned seat. He was the one making racist comments and threats. If anyone should be removed, it's him. "I appreciate your perspective," Margaret said in a tone that suggested she did not in fact appreciate it at all. "But airline policy requires us to investigate complaints. Miss Williams, I'm going to need you to gather your belongings and—" "No." The word came from Caroline, quiet but absolute. Margaret blinked. "Excuse me. I said no." Caroline's voice was steady now, the initial shock wearing off to reveal something harder underneath. "I have done nothing wrong. I will not be removed from this flight for asking to sit in the seat I paid for. If Mr. Henderson feels uncomfortable, he's welcome to take another flight. But I'm not going anywhere. Miss Williams? And..." Caroline continued, her voice growing stronger. I would suggest that before you continue with this, you ask yourself if removing a black child from a flight because a white man lied about her after multiple witnesses confirm he was in the wrong is really a situation you want to be part of. Because those cameras... She gestured to the phone still recording. They're going to make sure everyone knows exactly what happened here. Margaret's face tightened. For several long seconds, she stared at Caroline, clearly trying to decide how to handle an 11-year-old who talked like a lawyer. Then Caroline said very quietly, "Would you like me to call my father?" Something flickered in Margaret's expression. "Your father?" "Yes, ma'am. He'll be very interested to hear about this situation. I'm sure he'll want to speak with the airline's management immediately. He tends to be very protective and very thorough." It was subtle, the shift in Caroline's tone, the implication in those words. But Margaret caught it. So did Brenda, whose face had gone pale. "Your father," Margaret repeated slowly. "David Williams," Caroline said, meeting her gaze directly. "Would you like his number?" The name hung in the air, and in that moment, watching recognition bloom across Margaret's face, watching it bloom across Brenda's face, across James's face, Caroline knew they'd figured it out. David Williams, CEO of Williams Technologies, billionaire, one of the most powerful black men in America, and Caroline's father. Margaret's voice had lost all its authority. Yes, Caroline said simply. "And my father is going to ask me how this flight went. What would you like me to tell him?" The cabin had gone absolutely silent. Even the passengers who didn't recognize the name could tell that something significant had just shifted. Margaret opened her mouth, closed it, opened it again. I need to speak with the captain." "Please do," Caroline said. "I'll wait right here, in my seat." Margaret retreated, practically fleeing up the aisle. Brenda followed, looking like she might be sick. In seat 5C, Robert Henderson had gone absolutely white. Caroline turned to look at him, and their eyes met across the cabin. She didn't say anything. Didn't have to. The message was clear. You have no idea what you just started. Henderson's hand trembled as he reached for his phone again. And Caroline, 11 years old with the weight of her father's name and her own hard-won dignity, pulled out her own phone and typed a text. "Hi, Daddy. We have a problem." Then she pressed send and waited for the world to change. The text message sat on Caroline's phone screen for exactly 8 seconds before 3 dots appeared indicating her father was typing. Then her phone buzzed with a call. Caroline looked at the screen, Dad, and then at the passengers around her phones, still raised cameras, still recording. She made a decision that would change everything. She answered on speaker. "Caroline." Her father's voice filled the cabin, deep and resonant, with that unmistakable authority that came from commanding boardrooms full of executives. "What's wrong?" "Hi, Daddy." Caroline's voice was calm, but everyone nearby could hear the slight tremor underneath. "I'm on the plane, but we haven't taken off yet. There's been a situation." "What kind of situation?" The temperature in his voice dropped about 20 degrees. Caroline took a breath. "A man was sitting in my seat when I boarded. Seat 2A, like always. When I asked him to check his ticket, he refused. He told me I belonged in economy near the bathrooms. He said people like me don't belong in first class." The silence on the other end of the line was the kind that precedes thunder. "He said what?" David Williams's voice was dangerously quiet now. "He implied I must have gotten my ticket through some diversity program. He said people like him belong here, and people like me don't. When I insisted he check his boarding pass, he tried to have me removed from the flight." Caroline's voice remained steady, factual. "It turned out he was in the wrong seat the entire time. His seat is 5C, but now he's filed a complaint saying I made him feel unsafe, and the head flight attendant just told me I might need to leave the plane." Another passenger, a businessman in his 40s sitting across the aisle, leaned toward his phone and said loudly enough for Caroline's phone to pick up. "Sir, I witnessed the entire thing. Your daughter did nothing wrong. The man was completely out of line." "So did I," said the young black woman from row 3. "She was respectful the whole time. He was racist and aggressive. I recorded it, called another passenger. Got the whole thing on video. David Williams was quiet for a long moment, and Caroline recognized that particular silence. It was the same one that preceded billion-dollar decisions, the same one that had toppled competitors and reshaped markets. It was the silence of a man calculating exactly how much force to apply to break something. "Put the head flight attendant on the phone," he said finally. "Daddy." "Now, Caroline." Caroline looked up at the aisle. Margaret had reappeared, flanked by Brenda and the captain himself, a gray-haired man with pilot's bars on his shoulders and an expression of deep concern. They'd clearly heard David Williams' voice carrying through the cabin. "Ma'am?" Caroline said, holding up her phone. "My father would like to speak with you." Margaret approached as if walking toward a minefield. She took the phone with trembling fingers. "This is Margaret Holbrook, senior flight attendant. To whom am I speaking?" "David Williams." The name dropped like a bomb. CEO of Williams Technologies. And more importantly, Caroline Williams's father. "I understand there's a problem with my daughter's seating." Margaret's face had gone from pale to gray. "Mr. Williams, there's been a complaint filed by a man who was sitting in her seat illegally, by a man who, from what I'm hearing, made racist comments to an 11-year-old child, by a man who tried to intimidate my daughter and then lied about her when he was proven wrong." David's voice was precision itself, each word landing like a hammer. "Is that accurate?" "Sir, I wasn't present for the initial." "Were there witnesses?" "Yes, but..." "Multiple witnesses." "Yes." "Video recordings?" Margaret swallowed hard. "Yes, sir." "Then let me be extraordinarily clear about what's going to happen next." David Williams's voice could have cut diamonds. "My daughter is going to remain in her assigned seat, the seat I paid for in first class, where she has every right to be. The man who harassed her is going to be removed from this flight immediately. And you, Ms. Holbrook, along with whoever else participated in trying to remove my daughter, instead of addressing the actual problem, are going to explain to your supervisors why you thought punishing a child for being black was an acceptable airline policy." "Mr. Williams, I never said anything about..." "You didn't have to say it. You're doing it." His voice was ice now. "A white man lies about a black child, and your first instinct is to remove the child. Do you understand how that looks? Do you understand what's going to happen when those videos go online? Because they will go online. This is 2025, Ms. Holbrook. Everyone has a camera, everyone has a platform, and everyone is watching." Margaret's hand shook so badly she nearly dropped the phone. "Sir, I was just trying to de-escalate. By escalating, by traumatizing my daughter, by teaching her that she can be in the right and still be punished because someone with more perceived authority decided she was the problem." David's voice rose slightly. "Put the captain on the phone." The captain, who'd been standing slightly behind Margaret, stepped forward and took the phone. "This is Captain Robert Mitchell." "Captain Mitchell, I'm going to ask you a direct question, and I want a direct answer. Is my daughter being removed from this flight?" Captain Mitchell looked at Caroline, then at the dozens of passengers watching with phones still recording. He looked at Margaret, whose career was clearly flashing before her eyes. He looked at Robert Henderson in seat 5C, who was trying to make himself as small as possible. "No, sir," Captain Mitchell said firmly. "She is not. Your daughter has done nothing wrong and will remain on this flight in her assigned seat." "Thank you. Now the man who harassed her, Mr. Henderson, I believe his name is, he needs to be removed." Captain Mitchell's jaw tightened. "Sir, I'm not sure we have grounds to. He filed a false complaint against a minor. He made racist statements witnessed by multiple passengers. He refused to follow crew instructions to check his boarding pass, creating a disruption to the boarding process. He attempted to intimidate an 11-year-old child." David's voice was a prosecutor building a case. "Captain, I've flown millions of miles. I know airline regulations. Any one of those things is grounds for removal. All of them together. That man should already be off your aircraft." "Mr. Williams. And if he's not removed, I will personally file a complaint with the FAA regarding this flight crew's handling of a civil rights violation." I will ensure this incident is investigated at the highest levels. I will make certain that every news outlet in the country knows that this airline allowed a black child to be racially harassed on one of their flights and did nothing about it." He paused. "Or you can handle this correctly in the next 5 minutes, and we can all move on with our day. Your choice." Captain Mitchell closed his eyes briefly. When he opened them, his decision was clear on his face. "Hold, please, Mr. Williams." He handed the phone back to Caroline, then turned to the 2 security officers who'd been standing at the entrance to the plane, waiting to see if they'd be needed. "Escort Mr. Henderson off the aircraft. He's being removed for disruptive behavior and filing a false complaint." Henderson shot to his feet. "You can't do this. I'm a platinum member. I'll sue. Sir," Captain Mitchell said, his voice carrying that unquestionable authority that comes with being responsible for 300 lives at 30,000 feet. "You deliberately sat in someone else's seat, refused to verify your boarding pass when asked, made inappropriate comments to a minor, and filed a false complaint. You're being removed. You can walk off with dignity or security can assist you. Choose now." Henderson's face cycled through rage, disbelief, and finally fear. He looked at Caroline, who met his gaze without flinching. He looked at the cameras still recording. He looked at the security officers approaching. "This isn't over," he said, his voice shaking. "You have no idea who you're dealing with. I have lawyers. I have connections. I'll bury all of you." "Sir," one of the security officers said, "you need to come with us." Henderson grabbed his briefcase and laptop with jerky, angry movements. As he was escorted up the aisle, passengers began to clap. It started with the young black woman in row 3, then spread through the cabin like wildfire. Applause, whistles, even a few cheers. Henderson's face burned crimson. He stopped next to Caroline's seat, and for a moment she thought he might say something. But then he just shook his head and continued up the jetway. His expensive suit and his entitlement unable to save him from the consequences of his own actions. The cabin erupted in conversation the moment he was gone. Passengers talking excitedly, sharing their own recordings, commenting on what they'd just witnessed. Caroline could hear fragments. "Did you see his face when, 'That little girl is my hero'? The father sounded like he could buy this whole airline." He probably could. Captain Mitchell returned to Caroline's seat. "Miss Williams, may I speak with your father again?" Caroline handed him the phone. "Mr. Williams, this is Captain Mitchell again. Mr. Henderson has been removed from the flight. I want to personally apologize to you and your daughter for how this situation was handled. It should never have gotten to this point." "No, it shouldn't have." David's voice was still hard, but some of the fury had drained from it. "Captain, I want to be clear. I'm not angry with you. You did the right thing just now. But someone on your crew's first instinct was to blame my daughter instead of protecting her. That's a training problem. That's a culture problem. And that's something your airline needs to address immediately." "I understand, sir. I'll be filing a full report." "See that you do. Can I speak to Caroline again?" The captain handed the phone back. "Daddy." Caroline said, her voice smaller now that the immediate crisis had passed. "Baby girl, are you okay?" And just like that, David Williams wasn't a billionaire CEO anymore. He was just a father worried about his daughter. "I'm okay," Caroline said, and was surprised to find her eyes burning with tears she refused to let fall. "I did what you taught me. I stood my ground. I was polite but firm. I didn't let him make me small. I'm so proud of you." His voice was thick with emotion. "But sweetheart, I'm so sorry you had to go through that. You shouldn't have to fight battles like that at 11 years old." "But I did have to," Caroline said quietly, "and I won." "Yes, you did. Caroline, listen to me. People are going to underestimate you your whole life. They're going to see your age, your gender, your skin color, and they're going to make assumptions. They're going to try to put you in boxes they think you belong in. And every single time you're going to have to prove them wrong. It's not fair. It's not right. But it's real." "I know, Daddy. But here's what else is real. You're brilliant. You're strong. You're my daughter, which means you've got Williams blood in your veins, and we don't back down. Ever." He paused. Do you want me to fly out there? I can have the jet ready in 30 minutes. I'll meet you in New York, or I can come back to LA right now if you don't want to take this flight. Caroline looked around the cabin, at the passengers who'd defended her, who were now smiling at her encouragingly, at James, the kind flight attendant who'd actually listened, at the empty seat where Henderson had been that physical proof that standing up for yourself mattered. No, she said. I want to take this flight. I earned this seat. She heard her father's smile through the phone. That's my girl. All right. But Caroline, keep your phone on. Anything else happens, anything at all, you call me immediately. I will. I love you, baby. I love you too, Daddy. She ended the call, and the cabin burst into applause again, this time directed at her. Caroline felt her cheeks heat, unused to this kind of attention. She gave a small wave, acknowledging them. The young black woman from row 3 came forward, her eyes bright. Hey, I'm Jasmine. I just wanted to say what you did was incredible. The way you stayed calm, the way you stood up to that man, you're amazing. Thank you, Caroline said. Thank you for speaking up too. It helped. Of course. We've got to have each other's backs, right? Jasmine held out her fist for a bump, and Caroline returned it, smiling for real now. More passengers approached, offering words of support, asking if she was okay, telling her she was brave. The elderly gentleman in the cardigan introduced himself as Professor Harold Chen, a retired law professor, and told her that her handling of the situation showed remarkable maturity and understanding of her rights. A mother traveling with 2 young daughters pointed Caroline out to them, saying, "That's how you stand up for yourself. That's what dignity looks like." Through it all, Caroline accepted the kindness with grace. But inside, she was still processing. The adrenaline was fading now, leaving behind the reality of what had just happened. A grown man had tried to take her seat, had belittled her, had implied she didn't belong. The airline staff had almost removed her instead of him. If she hadn't known her rights, if she hadn't had her father's name behind her, if those passengers hadn't recorded and spoken up, what would have happened? The thought made her feel cold. Captain Mitchell returned to the cabin and approached her seat. He crouched down so he was at eye level with her. Miss Williams, I want to apologize again personally. You were treated unfairly by members of my crew, and that's unacceptable. If you'd like to file a formal complaint, I'll make sure it's given full attention. What about the flight attendant? Caroline asked quietly. Brenda. She sided with him even after I showed my ticket. She was going to remove me. Captain Mitchell's expression darkened. She and Ms. Holbrook will both be facing disciplinary review. I can't discuss the specifics with you, but I can promise you this will be taken seriously. Caroline nodded slowly. I don't want anyone to lose their job, she said, surprising herself with the words. I just want them to understand why what they did was wrong. I want them to think twice before assuming the black person is the problem next time. That's very mature of you, Captain Mitchell said, and very kind. But Miss Williams, sometimes consequences are necessary for people to learn. What happened here today can't be ignored or swept under the rug. It's bigger than one incident. I know, Caroline said. My father says that sometimes you have to be the example so it's easier for the next person. Your father is a wise man. Captain Mitchell stood. We're going to get this flight moving now. Again, I'm deeply sorry for your experience today. As he walked away, James approached with a bottle of water and a warm towel. Thought you might need these, he said gently. Are you really okay? That was a lot to handle. Caroline accepted both gratefully. I think I will be, she said. Eventually. For what it's worth, I think you handled it perfectly. You were calm, you knew your rights, and you didn't let anyone intimidate you. That takes real courage. Or stubbornness, Caroline said with a slight smile. James laughed. Sometimes they're the same thing. He started to leave, then turned back. Miss Williams, thank you. For what? For showing all of us what integrity looks like. He gestured around the cabin. These passengers will remember this. They'll remember that standing up matters. They'll remember that silence in the face of injustice is its own kind of wrong. You taught everyone on this plane something important today. After he left, Caroline settled back into her seat and let out a long, shaky breath. Her hands were trembling now that everything was over. She clasped them together in her lap, willing them to be still. The boarding process resumed, the remaining passengers filing in with curious glances at the now famous seat 2A. Caroline heard whispers, saw people pointing her out to their companions. Someone was already tweeting about it. She heard a passenger in row 4 reading aloud, "Just witnessed incredible act of courage from an 11-year-old girl on flight 2847. The plane began to fill with the normal sounds of travel luggage being stowed, overhead bins clicking shut, seat belts fastening. But there was an electric undercurrent now, a sense that everyone on this flight had shared something significant. A flight attendant Caroline hadn't seen before, an older woman with kind eyes and gray-streaked hair, stopped by her seat. "Hi, sweetheart, I'm Donna. I just came on for this shift and heard what happened. Can I get you anything? Juice, snacks, anything at all?" "I'm okay, thank you," Caroline said. "Well, if you need anything at all during the flight, you just press that call button." "Okay. Anything at all." Caroline nodded, touched by the genuine concern in Donna's voice. As the minutes ticked by and the cabin doors were finally secured, Caroline pulled out her tablet and tried to focus on the book she'd been reading, but the words swam in front of her eyes. She kept replaying the confrontation in her mind, analyzing it the way her father had taught her to analyze business problems. What had she done right? What could she have done differently? Had she been too confrontational? Not confrontational enough? Her phone buzzed with texts. Her older brother Marcus, a sophomore at Stanford. "Mom just told me what happened. Are you okay? I'm calling Dad." Her Aunt Vivian. "Caroline, baby. Your father called me. I'm so sorry you went through that. You call me when you land. Okay? Love you so much." Her best friend Zoe. "OMG, Caroline, there's a video going around Twitter already. You're trending. Are you famous now?" Caroline's stomach dropped. Trending already. She opened Twitter with shaking fingers and searched for the flight number. There it was. Dozens of tweets, hundreds more appearing as she watched. Videos from multiple angles showing the confrontation, showing Henderson's fury, showing her calm responses. The hashtags #SeatStolen, #BlackGirl, Magic, and #JusticeForCaroline were climbing rapidly. One tweet had over 50,000 retweets already. 11-year-old black girl Caroline Williams destroys racist businessman who tried to steal her first-class seat. Her composure is everything. Her father is CEO David Williams. That man picked the wrong one. Thread. Another with a video clip. The way she said, "My name is Caroline," when he called her little girl. The dignity. The power we stan a queen. Seat stolen. And another. Can we talk about how the flight attendant tried to remove the child instead of the lying racist adult? This is exactly what black women and girls face every day. #SeatStolen. Caroline scrolled through them, her emotions swinging wildly between pride and mortification. Pride that people saw her courage. Mortification that her face was now plastered across social media. Pride that the story was spreading, that maybe it would make a difference. Mortification that she was now trending something she'd never wanted to be. Her phone rang. Marcus, his face filling her screen via video call, his expression concerned. "Caroline, are you okay? What the hell happened?" "I'm fine," she said automatically. "Don't give me 'I'm fine.' Dad sounded ready to buy the whole airline just to fire everyone. Mom is freaking out. She's trying to get an earlier flight from London. Tell me what happened." So Caroline told him, her voice steadier now. Marcus listened, his jaw clenching tighter with each detail, his eyes darkening with anger. "That racist piece of—" He stopped himself. "I can't believe they tried to remove you. I can't believe someone would treat you like that." "It's not the first time," Caroline said quietly. Remember that hotel in Miami? The department store in Manhattan? The... I know. Marcus ran a hand over his face. It's just, you're 11, Caroline. You're a kid. You should be worried about homework and your friends, and whether you'll make the soccer team, not standing up to racist adults who want to put you in your place. But I did stand up to him, Caroline pointed out. And I won. Yeah, you did. Marcus's face softened into pride. You really did. Little sis, you were incredible. I watched the video, everyone's watching the video. The way you stayed calm, the way you didn't back down. Dad's right to be proud of you. They talked for a few more minutes before Marcus had to go to class. After he hung up, Caroline noticed more messages flooding in from family friends, from her father's business associates, from people she'd never even met. The plane was pushing back from the gate now, the gentle jolt as the tug began pulling them backward. Captain Mitchell's voice came over the intercom. Flight attendants, prepare for departure. Caroline looked out the window at the Los Angeles tarmac, the baggage carts and fuel trucks, the other planes lined up for takeoff. Somewhere out there, Robert Henderson was probably arranging another flight, nursing his wounded pride, maybe calling his lawyers. Somewhere out there, thousands, no hundreds of thousands of people were watching videos of what had happened, forming opinions, sharing their own stories of discrimination and prejudice. But here in seat 2A, Caroline Williams was exactly where she belonged. The plane taxied toward the runway, joining the queue of aircraft waiting for clearance. Inside the cabin, passengers settled in, conversations dying down as people prepared for takeoff. But Caroline could still feel eyes on her, could still sense the residual energy from what had transpired. As they waited in line, Donna appeared again with a tray. Thought you might like these now rather than waiting, she said, offering cookies and a juice box. And this is from the captain. She held up a pair of wings, the little pin they sometimes gave children. He wanted you to have them. Caroline took the wings, feeling their weight in her palm. Thank you. You're very welcome, honey. Donna patted her shoulder gently. You're going to go far in life, I can tell. After Donna left, Caroline pinned the wings to her blazer right over her heart. They felt like a badge of honor, a reminder that sometimes standing your ground meant flying higher than anyone expected you could. The plane turned onto the runway, engines spooling up with that powerful whine that always made Caroline's heart beat faster. Through her window, she could see the runway stretching ahead, heat shimmering off the asphalt. Captain Mitchell's voice. Flight attendants, prepare for takeoff. The engines roared. The plane surged forward, pressing Caroline back into her seat. Faster, faster. The white lines on the runway blurring together, the whole massive machine trembling with gathered power. And then, liftoff. The nose lifted. The ground fell away. Los Angeles spread out below them, a sprawling tapestry of streets and buildings and lives, all connected in ways visible and invisible. Caroline watched the city shrink, her reflection ghosting in the window beside it. 11 years old, 4'9", 87 pounds, but bigger than anyone had assumed, stronger than they'd expected, unbreakable in the ways that mattered most. She thought about her mother, gone 3 years now, but always present in the lessons she'd taught, the strength she'd modeled. Her mother, who'd faced her own battles with grace and fire, who'd told Caroline stories about her grandmother facing down segregation, her great-grandmother surviving worse. You come from a long line of women who refuse to be broken, her mother had said near the end, her voice weak, but her words strong. They're all in you, baby. All their courage, all their dignity, all their fight. Don't ever forget that. Caroline touched the wings on her blazer, then pulled out her tablet. She had homework to do, a book to finish, a whole flight ahead of her. Normal 11-year-old concerns despite everything that had just happened. But as they climbed toward cruising altitude, as the clouds rushed past her window and the earth became a distant abstraction, Caroline couldn't help but wonder what would happen next. The videos were viral. Her father was angry. The airline would have to respond. And Robert Henderson, whatever happened to him, would send its own message about consequences and accountability. The story wasn't over. In some ways, it was just beginning. But for now, in this moment suspended between earth and sky, Caroline Williams closed her eyes and simply breathed. She'd stood her ground. She'd won her seat. She'd shown the world exactly who she was. And she'd done it with dignity, intact, head held high exactly as her mother had taught her, exactly as a Williams should. The plane leveled off at 37,000 feet, and the seatbelt sign dinked off. Around Caroline, passengers stirred, reaching for laptops and books, settling into the familiar rhythm of a cross-country flight. But the energy in the cabin remained charged electric with the residue of what had happened on the ground. Caroline tried to focus on her tablet on the chemistry homework her tutor had assigned, balancing equations, calculating molar masses, problems with clear answers, unlike the messy reality of human prejudice. But her concentration kept fracturing, pulled back to her phone, where notifications continued to explode like fireworks. Her social media accounts, which she barely used, maintained mostly because her friends insisted, were flooded with followers. Her mentions were a waterfall of comments, some supportive, some curious, and disturbingly, some viciously hateful. She scrolled past messages, calling her privileged entitled, playing the race card. Others defended her fiercely, attacking the attackers. The internet had turned her life into a battlefield, and she hadn't even landed yet. A shadow fell across her seat. Caroline looked up to find a white woman in her late 50s standing in the aisle, her expression uncertain. "I'm sorry to bother you," the woman said, her voice soft. "I'm sitting in row 6. I just wanted to say, I'm a teacher, elementary school, and what I saw you do today, the way you advocated for yourself with such dignity, that's what I try to teach my students, especially my students of color who face situations like this all the time." Her eyes were bright with tears. "Thank you for being such a powerful example." Caroline felt her throat tighten. "Thank you for saying that. I mean it. You're remarkable." The woman squeezed her shoulder gently before returning to her seat. Before Caroline could fully process the interaction, another passenger approached, a black man in his 30s with kind eyes and a business suit. "Hey, I don't want to overwhelm you, but I had to tell you something. My daughter is 9. She's brilliant, confident, everything. But last month she was at a birthday party, all white kids except her, and one of the mothers asked whose nanny she belonged to." His voice cracked slightly. "She was so hurt, so confused. I didn't know how to explain it to her, how to prepare her for a world that's going to question her belonging over and over again. But I'm going to show her the video of you today. I'm going to tell her this is how you respond. This is what strength looks like." "I'm sorry about your daughter," Caroline said, meaning it deeply. Tell her she belongs everywhere she has a right to be, and anyone who suggests otherwise is wrong." "I will." He smiled, though sadness lingered in his expression. "Thank you, Caroline Williams. You did something important today." After he left, Caroline felt the weight of it all pressing down on her chest. She wasn't just an 11-year-old girl anymore. She was a symbol, a lesson, a weapon in arguments she hadn't chosen to join. The responsibility of it felt enormous, crushing. Her phone buzzed with a text from her father. "How are you holding up, baby girl? Saw the Twitter trends. This is getting big." Caroline typed back, "I'm okay. It's a lot. People keep coming up to talk to me." 3 dots appeared immediately. "Do you want me to have the airline ask people to give you space?" She considered it. Part of her wanted to hide, to disappear into her seat and her homework, and pretend none of this had happened. But another part, the part that was truly her father's daughter, understood that visibility mattered, that her story was resonating because it was everyone's story, every black person who'd been questioned, challenged, dismissed in spaces they had every right to occupy. "No," she typed. "It's okay. They're being kind. You're handling this beautifully. I'm proud of you. But Caroline, brace yourself. This is going to get bigger before it gets smaller. The media is already calling my office." Caroline's stomach clenched. Media. She hadn't even thought about that. Of course they would want interviews, statements, sound bites to feed the endless hunger for content. "What should I say if they contact me?" she texted back. "Nothing. Say nothing to anyone without talking to me first. I'm having our legal team prepare a statement. Just focus on getting to New York safely. We'll handle the rest. Our legal team. The reminder of her family's resources felt both comforting and strange. She'd stood up for herself today, yes, but she'd done it, backed by wealth and power that most people didn't have. What about all the black kids who faced similar situations without a billionaire father to call? What happened to them? The thought sat heavy in her chest as she put her phone down. Donna appeared with a tray. Lunch service, sweetheart. We have chicken or pasta today. Chicken, please, Caroline said. As Donna set down the tray, she leaned in slightly. Between you and me, the whole crew is talking about what happened. Most of us are mortified by how Brenda and Margaret handled it. That's not who we are as an airline, and it's definitely not who we are as people. She straightened her voice professional again, but her eyes still warm. Enjoy your meal, honey. The chicken was institutional, but edible. Caroline ate mechanically, her mind elsewhere. Through her window, clouds stretched endlessly pure white mountains and valleys that looked solid enough to walk on. Somewhere below, America spread out farmland and cities' highways and rivers, millions of lives unfolding in parallel. Excuse me. A teenage girl, maybe 16, stood nervously in the aisle. She was white, with purple streaks in her hair and anxiety written across her face. I'm sorry. I know everyone keeps bothering you, but I needed to say something. Caroline set down her fork. It's okay. I'm sitting back in row 12 and I watched everything. And the thing is, I didn't say anything. I didn't speak up. I just sat there filming like everyone else. Her voice wavered. But I should have said something. I should have told that man he was wrong. I should have defended you. And I didn't, and I feel terrible about it, and I'm sorry. The raw honesty of it caught Caroline off guard. You don't have to apologize to me. But I do, because my silence was just as bad as what he did. Maybe worse because I knew it was wrong and I said nothing. Tears spilled down her cheeks. I've been reading about this stuff, about being an ally, about not being a bystander. And when it actually mattered, I froze. I was a coward. Caroline reached out and gently touched the girl's hand. You weren't a coward. You were scared. That man was intimidating, and standing up to adults is hard. Believe me, I know. She offered a small smile. But the fact that you're aware of it now that you're thinking about it, that matters. Next time you'll speak up. You'll be braver. That's how we grow. The girl nodded, wiping her eyes. Next time, I promise. Next time, I won't be silent. After she left, Caroline felt a strange mixture of sadness and hope. Sadness that speaking up required bravery at all. Hope that maybe, just maybe today, had changed something in people who'd witnessed it. Her phone rang. Private number. Caroline hesitated, then answered. Is this Caroline Williams? A woman's voice, professional and crisp. Yes. My name is Sandra Morrison. I'm a producer with CNN. I'm calling because we'd like to interview you about the incident on Flight 2847. We think your story deserves to be heard and... I can't talk to you, Caroline interrupted, remembering her father's instructions. I'm 11. You need to speak with my father. Of course, of course. Could you provide his contact information? Caroline rattled off her father's office number, then ended the call. Within seconds, her phone rang again. ABC News, then NBC, then a dozen other numbers she didn't recognize. She turned her phone to airplane mode, heart pounding. This was really happening. This was national news. Jasmine appeared from row 3, sliding into the empty seat beside Caroline with a concerned expression. Hey, you okay? You look overwhelmed. The news is calling, Caroline said quietly. Like actual TV news. CNN, ABC, all of them. Jasmine's eyebrows rose. Wow. I mean, I'm not surprised the video's gone completely viral, but wow. She studied Caroline's face. How are you feeling about all this? I don't know, Caroline admitted. Part of me is glad people care. Part of me wishes none of it had happened. Part of me is scared about what comes next. All of those feelings are valid, Jasmine said gently. You went through something traumatic. You handled it with incredible grace, but that doesn't mean it wasn't traumatic. And now you're dealing with the aftermath, which is its own kind of stress." She paused. "Can I tell you something?" Caroline nodded. "I'm a therapist. I've worked with kids and teens, actually. And one thing I've learned is that experiencing racism, especially public racism, like what happened to you, it's a form of trauma. Your body went into fight or flight mode. Your nervous system was activated. And even though you won, even though the situation resolved in your favor, your body still experienced that threat." Jasmine's voice was kind but serious. "So if you feel shaky or scared or angry or even numb, that's all normal. That's all okay." Carolyn felt tears burning behind her eyes again. "I thought I had to be strong." "You were strong. You are strong. But strength doesn't mean pretending you're not affected. Strength means acknowledging the impact and processing it healthily." Jasmine squeezed her hand. "Do you have someone you can talk to about this? A therapist? A counselor?" "My dad will probably make me see someone now," Caroline said with a slight smile. "Good, let him." Jasmine stood. "I'm going back to my seat, but if you need anything, even just to talk, I'm right there, okay?" After Jasmine left, Caroline sat with her thoughts with the swirl of emotions she'd been trying to keep contained. Trauma. She turned the word over in her mind. It felt too big, too dramatic for what had happened. But maybe Jasmine was right. Maybe standing your ground against hatred left marks you couldn't see. The captain's voice crackled over the intercom. "Folks, we're encountering a bit of weather ahead. We're going to be experiencing some turbulence for the next 15 to 20 minutes. Please return to your seats and fasten your seatbelts." The plane began to rock and shudder, that stomach-dropping sensation of hitting air pockets. Around Caroline, passengers shifted, nervously gripping armrests. The overhead bins creaked. Someone's bag shifted with a thud. Caroline gripped her own armrests, forcing herself to breathe steadily. Her father had taught her that turbulence was normal, that planes were built to handle it, that the danger was mostly in people's minds. But her body didn't care about statistics right now. Her body was already on edge from everything else, and the physical instability of the plane triggered something primal. The turbulence worsened. The plane dropped suddenly, then rose, then dropped again. A woman across the aisle gasped. A child started crying somewhere behind Caroline. "Ladies and gentlemen, this is Captain Mitchell. I'm going to ask the flight attendants to take their seats as well. We're going to be in this rough air for a bit longer than anticipated. Please remain seated with your seatbelts fastened." The plane lurched violently. Overhead bins popped open. Someone's laptop fell into the aisle with a crack. The lights flickered. Caroline's heart hammered. This was fine. This was normal. This was her phone still in her hand from earlier, buzzed with a notification despite being in airplane mode. A downloaded message from before must have just appeared. She glanced at the screen, and her blood went cold. It was an email to her school account forwarded from someone she didn't know. The subject line, "You'll pay for this." Her hands shook as she opened it. "You think you're special because your daddy has money. You think you can destroy a man's life and get away with it? You're just an entitled brat playing the race card. People like you are what's wrong with this country. Be careful, Caroline Williams. The internet knows who you are now. It knows where you go to school, where you live. You're not safe. None of you are." The words swam in front of her eyes. The plane shook harder. Her breath came in short gasps. "Sweetheart." Donna had appeared, clinging to the seats for balance, despite the captain's orders to sit. "Are you okay? You're pale." Caroline couldn't speak. She just held out the phone. Donna read the message, her face darkening. "Oh, honey, oh no." She knelt beside Caroline's seat, one hand gripping the armrest for stability as the plane bucked. "Listen to me. These people are cowards. They hide behind screens and type poison, but they don't actually do anything. They're trying to scare you." "It's working," Caroline whispered. "I know, but here's what we're going to do. We're going to tell the captain about this. We're going to make sure the airline's security team knows, and they're going to track down whoever sent this and make sure they face consequences." Donna's voice was fierce. "You did nothing wrong, Caroline. You stood up for yourself, And if some hateful person can't handle that, that's their problem, not yours. But it felt like Caroline's problem. It felt very much like her problem as the plane shook, and the threatening words echoed in her mind, and the weight of becoming a public figure crashed down on her 11-year-old shoulders. Donna pressed the call button repeatedly until Captain Mitchell's voice came through irritated. "Donna, I told everyone to sit down." "Captain, we have a situation. Caroline Williams just received a threatening message. It mentions her school, her home. It's a direct threat." The turbulence seemed to pause for a moment, or maybe Caroline just stopped noticing it. Captain Mitchell's voice changed, became sharper. "Understood. I'm contacting ground security now. Stay with her." Donna squeezed Caroline's hand. "You're going to be okay. We're going to make sure you're safe." But Caroline wasn't sure she believed her. Because the safety she'd felt in her father's name, in her own righteousness, had just been revealed as an illusion. Stand up to racists, and they might get removed from a flight, yes, but they'd still find ways to hurt you. They'd still reach through screens and across distances to make sure you paid for embarrassing them. The plane hit another violent pocket of air. Caroline's stomach lurched. The cabin lights flickered again, and for a moment they were in darkness except for the gray light from the windows. When the lights came back, Caroline saw other passengers looking around nervously, wondering if this was still normal turbulence or if something was actually wrong. Donna's radio crackled. She listened, nodded, then looked at Caroline. "Captain wants to talk to you. Can you handle that?" Caroline nodded, though she wasn't sure. Donna pulled out a phone, the flight crew's internal line, and handed it to Caroline. "Miss Williams." Captain Mitchell's voice was calm, authoritative, grounding. "I understand you received a threatening message." "Yes, sir." "First, I want you to know that you're safe on this aircraft. No one here is going to hurt you. Second, I've already contacted both airport security in New York and the FBI. They'll be waiting when we land to take your statement and investigate this threat. Third, your father has been notified, and he's aware of the situation." Caroline's chest tightened. "You called my dad." "I'm required to by law when a minor receives a threat during flight. He's been briefed and he's taking appropriate action on his end as well." Which meant lawyers, security teams, possibly a media firestorm. Her father didn't do anything halfway. "Miss Williams, are you still with me?" "Yes, sir." "Good. Now I need you to forward that email to this address." He rattled off an email for the airline security department. "Don't delete it. Don't respond to it. Just forward it." "Can you do that?" "Yes, sir." "Excellent. Then I need you to try to relax and let us handle this. I know that's easier said than done, but you've done your part. The rest is up to the adults now." After she forwarded the email and hung up, Caroline sat in her seat, feeling smaller than she had all day. The turbulence was easing now, the plane steadying, but the storm inside her showed no signs of calming. Donna hadn't left her side. "Do you want me to sit with you for a while?" Caroline wanted to say no, wanted to prove she could handle this alone. But the word that came out was yes. So Donna stayed perched on the armrest of the empty seat beside Caroline, talking quietly about her own children, about flying for 23 years, about the incredible people she'd met and the difficult situations she'd navigated. She didn't talk about the threat, didn't talk about what had happened with Henderson, just filled the space with gentle words that required nothing from Caroline except to listen. Slowly, gradually, Caroline's heartbeat returned to normal. The plane smoothed out. The seatbelt sign dinked off again. Other passengers began moving around once more, heading to bathrooms, stretching their legs. Professor Chen appeared in the aisle, his cardigan slightly rumpled from the turbulence. "Excuse me, I don't mean to intrude, but I couldn't help overhearing some of what happened. I want you to know that threatening a minor online is a federal crime. Whoever sent that message can face serious legal consequences, fines, even imprisonment. The FBI takes these things very seriously, especially when they involve children." "Thank you," Caroline said softly. "And Caroline, may I call you Caroline?" At her nod, he continued. "What you did today by standing up to that man was important. But it also made you visible, and visibility comes with both rewards and risks. You're learning that earlier than most people ever have to. But you're not alone in this. Your family, these passengers, the legal system, we're all on your side. After he returned to his seat, Jasmine came back. I heard about the email. Are you okay? I don't know, Caroline admitted. Is it always like this? When you stand up, do people always try to tear you down? Sometimes, Jasmine said honestly. People who benefit from the status quo get angry when someone challenges it. You challenged a lot of assumptions today about age, about race, about who belongs in first class. Some people can't handle that challenge, so they lash out. She paused. But here's the thing, they lash out because you won, because you stood your ground and proved them wrong. Their anger is actually evidence of your power. I don't feel powerful, Caroline whispered. I feel scared. Those aren't mutually exclusive. You can be both. Jasmine squeezed her shoulder. And being scared but doing it anyway, that's courage. The flight attendants began collecting lunch trays. Normal service resuming as if everything was normal. But nothing felt normal anymore. Caroline had boarded this plane as a regular kid, and she'd be landing as something else entirely, a viral sensation, a symbol, a target. Her phone, back on airplane mode, but still showing downloaded messages, continued buzzing periodically with alerts. She didn't look, couldn't look. Whatever was being said about her on social media could wait. Had to wait because she couldn't process anything more right now. Donna brought her a warm cookie and a cup of hot chocolate. Captain's orders, she said with a wink. Said you deserved something sweet after everything. The chocolate was rich and comforting. The cookie was still soft in the middle. Small kindnesses that reminded Caroline that not everyone was cruel. Not everyone was hateful. Not everyone saw her as a problem to be solved or a threat to be neutralized. An announcement crackled overhead. Ladies and gentlemen, we've begun our initial descent into the New York area. We should be on the ground in approximately 45 minutes. Flight attendants prepare the cabin for arrival. 45 minutes until her father. Until FBI agents and security teams and whatever came next. 45 minutes still suspended in this strange liminal space between who she'd been and who she was becoming. Caroline looked out the window as the plane descended through clouds, as patches of landscape began appearing below the geometric patterns of farmland, the glint of rivers and lakes, the sprawl of suburban developments. Somewhere down there, her father was waiting. Somewhere down there, Robert Henderson was probably nursing his rage and plotting revenge. Somewhere down there, millions of people were watching videos of her forming opinions, choosing sides. But up here, for these last 45 minutes, she was just Caroline. Just an 11-year-old girl who'd done a brave thing and was paying the price for it. Just a kid who wanted her dad and wanted to feel safe and wanted the world to be simpler than it was. The plane banked gently, turning toward its approach vector. Through the window, Caroline caught a glimpse of the Manhattan skyline, tiny and distant, but unmistakable. Home. Or at least one of her homes. The Williams family penthouse on the Upper East Side, the place where she'd grown up, where her mother's presence still lingered in photographs and furniture and memories. We're almost there, Donna said gently. You made it. Caroline nodded, but she knew this wasn't an ending. This was barely even a beginning. The real challenges, the interviews, the scrutiny, the ongoing threat from people who hated what she represented, all of that still waited on the ground. But she'd faced down a racist adult and won. She'd stood her ground when flight attendants tried to remove her. She'd called her father and watched justice happen in real time. If she could do all that, maybe she could handle what came next. Maybe. The wheels touched down at JFK with a chirp of rubber on concrete, and Caroline felt the massive deceleration as the engines reversed thrust. The plane shuddered and slowed, taxiing off the runway toward the terminal. Through her window, she could see ground crew in their reflective vests, baggage carts lined up other planes coming and going in the eternal dance of modern aviation. But something was different. As they approached the gate, Caroline noticed an unusual number of vehicles converging on their arrival area. Security trucks with flashing lights, black SUVs with tinted windows, a cluster of people in suits standing on the tarmac with badges gleaming on their belts. Is that normal? She asked Donna, who'd stayed nearby during the descent. Donna looked out the window, and her expression tightened. No, honey. That's for you. That's the FBI, and probably airport security. And if I had to guess, one of those SUVs contains your father. Caroline's heart began hammering again. The reality of the situation crashed over her anew. This wasn't just a family matter anymore. This was federal. This was serious. This was the kind of thing that made the news not for a day, but for weeks. The plane lurched to a stop at the gate. The seatbelt sign dinged off, but Captain Mitchell's voice immediately came over the intercom before anyone could stand. Ladies and gentlemen, please remain seated for a moment. We have some special circumstances today that require us to deplane in a specific order. Miss Caroline Williams, please remain seated. Everyone else, you're free to deplane as normal, but I'd ask for your patience and understanding. Passengers turned to look at Caroline. Some with sympathy, some with curiosity, all of them aware they'd been part of something significant. As they began gathering their belongings, many stopped by her seat to offer final words of support. Stay strong, sweetheart. You're amazing, young lady. My daughter is going to hear about you. Thank you for teaching us all something today. The elderly Professor Chen paused longest. Caroline, I meant what I said earlier. If you or your family need any legal guidance through this, particularly regarding the civil rights aspects, please don't hesitate to reach out. I may be retired, but I still have connections. He handed her a business card. I mean that sincerely. Jasmine was last. She hugged Caroline tightly. You have my number now. Use it if you need to talk, okay, day or night. What you went through today, it's a lot. Don't try to process it alone. As the cabin emptied, Caroline felt increasingly exposed. She was the last passenger now sitting in seat 2A, while flight attendants cleaned around her and the ground crew prepared to service the aircraft. Through the window, she could see camera crews setting up outside the security perimeter. Word had spread fast. Captain Mitchell emerged from the cockpit and approached her seat. He'd removed his captain's hat, and without it, he looked older, more human. Lines creased his forehead as he crouched beside her. Miss Williams, before we let anyone else on board, I want to personally apologize again for what happened today. I've been flying for 32 years, and I've never been more ashamed of how my crew handled a situation. His voice was heavy with genuine regret. Brenda and Margaret have both been suspended pending a full investigation. That's not enough, I know that, but it's a start. What about the other passengers? Caroline asked. From the video, I mean. Are they in trouble for recording? No. In fact, their recordings are going to be crucial evidence in multiple investigations. Captain Mitchell stood. Your father is waiting just outside. So are federal agents who need to take your statement about the threat you received. Are you ready? Caroline took a deep breath. I guess I have to be. You've been incredibly brave today. But Caroline... He paused, choosing his words carefully. The hard part might just be beginning. The scrutiny, the attention, the people who'll want pieces of your story. Stay close to people you trust. Okay. Before Caroline could respond, the forward door opened and David Williams strode onto the plane. He was the imposing figure, 6'3", broad-shouldered, his presence filling any space he entered. He wore a charcoal suit that probably cost more than most people's monthly salary, but his tie was loosened and his eyes were raw with emotion. When he saw Caroline, his carefully maintained CEO composure cracked. Baby girl. His voice broke on the words. Caroline unbuckled and ran to him. He caught her in his arms and held her so tightly she could barely breathe, but she didn't care. This was her father, her protector, the man who'd taught her to be strong, but who never demanded she be strong alone. I'm okay, Daddy, she whispered into his chest. I'm okay. You shouldn't have had to go through that. His voice was muffled against her hair. You're 11 years old. You should be worried about school projects and sleepovers, not standing up to racist adults and receiving death threats. But I did stand up, Caroline said, pulling back to look at him. I did exactly what you and Mom taught me. I didn't back down. Pride and pain warred across David Williams's face. "I know you did, baby. I'm so proud of you I can barely breathe. But I'm also so angry I could—" He stopped himself, glancing at Captain Mitchell, who was watching them with understanding eyes. "We're going to make this right. All of it. I promise you that." Two people in FBI windbreakers appeared at the door. A woman in her 40s with sharp eyes and an air of competence, and a younger man with a kind face that probably put witnesses at ease. "Mr. Williams," the woman said, "I'm Special Agent Lisa Chen, and this is Special Agent Marcus Rodriguez. We need to speak with your daughter about the threat she received during the flight." David's arm tightened around Caroline's shoulders. "Not here. Not on this plane where she's already been traumatized. We'll go somewhere private." "Sir, we understand, but time is crucial in these investigations." "I don't care." David's voice carried that tone. Caroline recognized the one that made executives scramble and lawyers take notes. "My daughter has been through enough today. You want to interview her? We do it in a secure private location with our attorney present. Non-negotiable." Agent Chen's expression suggested she was about to argue, but Agent Rodriguez touched her arm gently. "We can accommodate that, Mr. Williams. There's a private conference room in the secure area of the terminal. Would that be acceptable?" David looked down at Caroline. "What do you think, baby? Can you handle answering some questions?" Caroline nodded, though her stomach churned. "I want to help catch whoever sent that message." "That's my girl." David kissed the top of her head, then addressed the agents. "Lead the way, but understand this: if at any point my daughter becomes distressed or asks to stop, we stop. Immediately." "Of course," Agent Rodriguez said. "We're here to help, not to add to her trauma." They deplaned through the jetway, but instead of entering the normal terminal, they were directed down a side corridor Caroline had never seen before. It was stark and utilitarian: concrete walls, painted institutional beige fluorescent lights humming overhead. Their footsteps echoed in the empty space. David kept Caroline close to his side, his hand never leaving her shoulder. Behind them walked a man Caroline hadn't noticed before, one of her father's security team, silent and watchful. Ahead, the FBI agents led them deeper into the airport's hidden infrastructure. They entered a small conference room with a table, several chairs, and nothing else except a camera mounted in one corner. Agent Chen gestured for them to sit, while Agent Rodriguez set up a laptop. "Before we begin," David said, still standing, "where's your attorney? I specifically said, I'm here." A woman in her 50s swept into the room, elegant in a navy pantsuit, her gray hair cut in a sharp bob. She carried a leather briefcase and an air of absolute competence. "Sarah Mitchell, David. I came straight from the office when you called." David relaxed fractionally. "Sarah, thank you. This is my daughter, Caroline." Sarah shook Caroline's hand with genuine warmth. "I've heard remarkable things about you, young lady. I'm here to make sure this interview is conducted properly and that your rights are protected. If anything makes you uncomfortable, you just look at me." "Okay." Caroline nodded, feeling slightly more secure with another adult in her corner. They all sat. Agent Chen opened a folder while Agent Rodriguez's laptop blinked to life. The camera in the corner had a little red light indicating it was recording. "Caroline." Agent Chen began, her voice gentler than it had been with David. "I know today has been difficult. We're going to make this as quick as possible. Can you tell me in your own words about the message you received?" Caroline recounted it, her voice steady at first but wavering when she got to the parts about her school, her home, the threat implicit in "you're not safe." Sarah took notes in a leather-bound journal. David's hand found Caroline's under the table and squeezed. "Did you recognize the sender?" Agent Rodriguez asked. "No. It came to my school email, but it was from an address I didn't know. Just numbers and letters, no real name." "That's common with these types of threats," Agent Chen said. "People hide behind anonymous accounts, but they often make mistakes, leave digital footprints. We're very good at tracking them down." "How long will that take?" David asked tersely. "Hard to say. Could be hours, could be days. But Mr. Williams, I want to assure you that we're taking this extremely seriously. Threatening a child is a federal offense. Threatening a child whose story has gone viral. Agent Chen's expression hardened. We're going to find whoever sent this and prosecute them to the fullest extent of the law. See that you do. David's voice was ice. Because if your investigation doesn't move fast enough, I have resources of my own. Private investigators, cybersecurity experts, people who can track a digital signature across continents. I will find out who threatened my daughter, and when I do. Mr. Williams. Sarah interrupted smoothly. Let's let the FBI do their job. I'm sure they're quite capable. David's jaw clenched, but he nodded curtly. Agent Rodriguez turned his laptop toward Caroline. I'm going to show you some social media accounts. Tell me if you recognize any of these people, or if any of these usernames seem familiar. Caroline looked at the screen. It showed Twitter profiles, dozens of them, all people who'd commented on videos of her confrontation with Henderson. Some comments were supportive. Others were vicious. Racial slurs, threats, accusations that she'd played the race card, or that her father had paid people to set Henderson up. That one, Caroline said, pointing to an account with a picture of an American flag and a username that was just numbers. They replied to one of the videos calling me a name. The N-word. Agent Chen made a note. What about this one? More profiles, more hate. Caroline's stomach turned as she realized just how many people had taken time out of their day to type poison about an 11-year-old girl they'd never met. This is enough, David said suddenly, his voice tight. She doesn't need to see any more of this garbage. Just a few more, Agent Chen said. Caroline, you're doing great. What about... I said enough. David stood towering over the table. My daughter has identified the key message and given you her statement. The rest is your job, not hers. Agent Chen looked like she might argue. But something in David Williams's expression, the barely controlled fury of a father watching his child be forced to confront hatred, made her close the laptop. You're right. We have what we need for now. She pulled out a business card and slid it across to Caroline. If you remember anything else, or if you receive any more threats, you call me immediately. Day or night, that's my direct line. Caroline pocketed the card, though she hoped desperately she'd never need to use it. As they stood to leave, Agent Rodriguez said quietly, For what it's worth. Miss Williams, what you did on that plane took real courage. My niece is about your age, and I'm going to make sure she sees those videos. I want her to know that standing up for yourself matters. Thank you, Caroline said softly. They left the conference room and made their way back through the secure corridors. But as they approached the main terminal, Caroline could hear something that made her steps falter. Voices, lots of them, shouting questions, calling her name. David heard it too. His expression darkened. They're not supposed to be in this area. How did reporters get past security? His security guard, a man named Marcus, who Caroline had known for years, spoke into his wrist. We have press at the exit point, requesting alternate route. A crackly response came back. All routes compromised. Media has surrounded the secure corridor exits. They must have been tipped off. David cursed under his breath. Sarah, can we... Already on it? Sarah was typing rapidly on her phone. I'm getting airport security to clear a path. But David, they can't remove the press entirely. They're in public areas. We're going to have to walk through them. Caroline's hands started shaking. She'd stood up to Henderson. She'd maintained her composure through FBI questioning. But the thought of walking through a wall of reporters, of cameras and microphones and shouted questions, it was too much. I can't, she whispered. Daddy, I can't. David knelt in front of her, his hands on her shoulders, his eyes level with hers. Yes, you can. You've already done the hard part, baby. This is just noise, just people who want a reaction. So we're going to walk through them with our heads high, and we're not going to say a word. We're going to get to the car, and then we're going home. Can you do that with me? Caroline took a shuddering breath. What if they ask about Henderson? What if they ask mean questions? Then we don't answer. We just keep walking. You hold my hand, you look straight ahead, and you remember that none of those people matter. The only thing that matters is getting you home safe." He touched her cheek gently. "You are Carolyn Williams. You are brilliant and brave, and you belong in every space you occupy. Don't let anyone, not Henderson, not internet trolls, not reporters, make you forget that." Caroline nodded, drawing strength from her father's certainty, even as fear coiled in her stomach. Marcus positioned himself in front of them. Sarah flanked Caroline's other side. They formed a protective triangle around her as they approached the doors that would lead to the public terminal. "Here we go," David murmured. "Stay close." The doors opened, and they were immediately engulfed in chaos. Camera flashes exploded like lightning. Microphones thrust toward them on extended poles. Reporters surged forward, held back only by a thin line of airport security guards who looked overwhelmed. "Caroline. Caroline, how do you feel about what happened? Mr. Williams, is it true you're suing the airline? Caroline, do you think Robert Henderson is racist? Mr. Williams, are you worried about the death threats against your daughter? Caroline, what would you say to other black children facing discrimination?" The questions came from everywhere at once, overlapping, aggressive, invasive. Caroline kept her eyes on the floor, on Marcus's back, on anything except the sea of faces and lenses. Her father's hand was an anchor, keeping her grounded as they pushed forward. "No comment," Sarah said crisply to every question. "No comment. The family will release a statement shortly. No comment." But the reporters didn't care. They kept shouting, kept filming, kept treating Caroline's trauma like content to be consumed. Someone got too close, and Marcus physically moved them back. Security guards struggled to maintain a corridor through the crowd. Caroline's breathing came faster. Too many people. Too much noise. The terminal was spinning, and she couldn't, "Look at me, baby." David's voice cut through the chaos. He'd stopped walking and crouched down again, blocking out the cameras with his body. "Look at me. Just me. Breathe with me. In through your nose, out through your mouth." Caroline matched his breathing, clinging to the steady rhythm. Around them, the reporters kept shouting, but David's face was her entire world right now. "That's it. You're okay. We're almost to the car. Just a little bit further." He stood, and they resumed walking. Caroline's hand crushing her father's as they navigated the gauntlet. They emerged into the pickup area, where a black SUV waited with its engine running. Marcus opened the door, and Caroline practically dove inside, scrambling across the leather seat to put as much distance between herself and the cameras as possible. David slid in beside her, and Marcus slammed the door, muffling the chaos outside to a dull roar. The SUV pulled away immediately, but Caroline could see through the tinted windows as reporters ran alongside for a few feet, still filming, still shouting questions that would go unanswered. Only when they merged onto the highway did Caroline finally let herself fall apart. The tears came suddenly and violently, great gulping sobs that shook her whole body. David pulled her into his arms and let her cry, one hand stroking her hair, his own eyes suspiciously bright. "I've got you," he murmured. "I've got you, baby girl. You're safe now. You're safe." But Caroline didn't feel safe. She felt exposed and raw and so incredibly tired. Tired of being strong, tired of being brave, tired of being an example. She just wanted to be 11. She just wanted this day to be over. "I hate this," she sobbed into her father's chest. "I hate that standing up for myself means all of this. I hate that people I've never met hate me. I hate that I can't just be normal." "I know," David's voice was rough. "I know, baby. It's not fair. None of this is fair." They rode in silence for a while, Caroline's sobs gradually subsiding into hiccups, and then exhausted stillness. Through the window, New York City passed by buildings and bridges, taxis and pedestrians, millions of lives unfolding in parallel to her own. Marcus's voice came from the driver's seat. "Sir, we have a situation." David tensed. "What kind of situation?" "There are reporters outside your building. At least 2 news vans set up on the street. And—" Marcus hesitated. "There's a crowd. Looks like protesters." Some are holding signs supporting Caroline. Others aren't. Damn it! David pulled out his phone and started typing rapidly. We're not going home. Marcus, take us to the safe house in Brooklyn. The safe house. Caroline had been there once before, after a credible kidnapping threat when she was 9. It was a nondescript brownstone, owned through several shell companies, unknown to anyone outside the family's inner circle. Secure. Private. Hidden. What about Mom? Caroline asked, her voice hoarse from crying. She's supposed to be flying back from London tomorrow. I'll have her go straight to the safe house too. David's fingers flew across his phone screen. Nobody needs to know where we are right now. We need time to let this settle, to let my legal team handle the press, to figure out our next move. Our next move? Caroline pulled back to look at him. What does that mean? David's expression was grim. Baby, this isn't going away quietly. Henderson is already making noise about suing you for defamation. The airline is scrambling to control the narrative. There are calls for federal investigations into their discrimination policies. You've become the center of a national conversation about racism and privilege and who belongs where. He cupped her face gently. We need to decide how we want to handle that. Whether we want to speak out publicly or maintain privacy. Whether we pursue legal action or let the airline handle it internally. These are big decisions with long-term consequences. I just wanted to sit in my seat, Caroline whispered. That's all I wanted. I know. But baby, sometimes small acts of courage become big symbols. Sometimes standing up for yourself means standing up for everyone who's ever been in your position. David's voice was gentle but serious. You have a choice now. You can let this story be told by other people, or you can help shape it yourself. Whatever you decide, I'll support you. But you need to think about what you want. Caroline leaned against her father's shoulder, watching the city slide past. What did she want? She wanted Henderson to face real consequences, not just removal from a flight, but real accountability for his racism. She wanted Brenda and Margaret to understand that their bias had real impacts on real people. She wanted other black kids to know they could stand up for themselves, that their belonging wasn't up for debate. But she also wanted privacy, wanted to go back to school without everyone staring, wanted to text her friends about normal things, wanted to be a kid. Can I have both? She asked quietly. Can I want justice and also want my life back? David kissed the top of her head. We're going to try, baby. We're going to try. The SUV turned onto a tree-lined street in Brooklyn, pulling up to a brownstone that looked identical to dozens of others on the block. Marcus got out first, scanning the area before opening Caroline's door. They hurried up the steps and inside the door, closing behind them with a solid thunk that felt like safety. The safe house was furnished simply but comfortably modern, but not flashy secure, but not sterile. David immediately went to the windows, checking that the security shutters were functioning. Marcus did a sweep of the other rooms. Caroline sank onto the couch, every muscle in her body aching with exhaustion. It was barely 3 in the afternoon, but she felt like she'd lived a week in the past 6 hours. Her phone buzzed. Against her better judgment, she looked at it. 5,000 new notifications. Her mentions were so full they'd stopped loading. 3 voicemails from numbers she didn't recognize. And a text from her best friend, Zoe. Caroline, OMG, are you okay? Everyone at school is talking about it. Mrs. Patterson made an announcement telling us not to bother you, but everyone wants to know if you're safe. Call me when you can. I'm so worried. Caroline typed back. I'm safe. It's been a lot. I'll call you later. Okay. Love you. Then she turned her phone off entirely. David appeared with a glass of water and handed it to her. Drink. You cried yourself dehydrated. She drank obediently, the cool water soothing her raw throat. We need to make some phone calls, David said, sitting beside her. But first, I need you to know something. Whatever happens next, whatever decisions we make, whatever consequences come from today, I want you to understand that you did nothing wrong. You hear me? Nothing. Then why does it feel like I'm being punished? Caroline's voice broke. Why do I have to hide in a safe house? Why are there people outside our home who hate me? Because the world is broken, baby. Because there are people who can't handle being proven wrong, who can't accept that a black girl has just as much right to first class as anyone else. Because racism and prejudice are so deeply embedded in our society that challenging them triggers this kind of backlash. David's voice was fierce now. But that's not your fault. That's not on you. You simply existed in a space you had every right to be in, and they couldn't handle it. So what do we do? Caroline asked. David was quiet for a moment, thinking. Then he said, "We fight back, not with anger or vengeance, but with truth and justice. We make sure Henderson faces consequences. We push the airline to implement real policy changes. We use your story if you're willing to start conversations about discrimination that desperately need to happen." He looked at her seriously. "But only if you're willing, Caroline. You don't owe anyone your story. You don't have to be a symbol if you don't want to be." Caroline thought about the passengers who'd spoken up for her, about Jasmine offering therapy resources, about the little black girls whose parents would show them the videos and tell them to be brave like Caroline Williams, about all the people who'd face their own Hendersons tomorrow and the next day and the day after that. "I want to help," she said slowly. "I want my story to matter. But Daddy, I'm tired. I'm so tired." "Then we rest," David said simply. "We rest today. Tomorrow we strategize. But right now, you're allowed to just be my daughter. Not a symbol, not a viral sensation. Just my baby girl who had a terrible day and needs her father." He pulled her close, and Caroline let herself be small again, let herself be held, let herself stop being brave for just a little while. Outside, the world was still spinning. Reporters were still filming. Social media was still exploding. Henderson was still plotting. The threats were still out there. But here in this moment, in this safe house in her father's arms, Caroline Williams was just a little girl who'd fought a battle and won, even though winning had cost more than she'd expected. And tomorrow, she'd figure out what came next. Caroline woke the next morning to sunlight streaming through unfamiliar curtains and the smell of her father's coffee drifting up from downstairs. For a blissful moment, she forgot where she was and why. Then memory crashed back like a wave. Henderson's sneer, the flight attendant's bias, the threatening email, the reporters shouting her name, and her chest tightened with anxiety. She reached for her phone on the nightstand, then remembered she'd turned it off. Part of her wanted to keep it that way forever, to stay in this bubble, where the outside world couldn't reach her. But another part needed to know what was happening, what people were saying, whether the story had grown or finally started to fade. Taking a deep breath, she powered it on. The notifications came in a flood. Texts, emails, missed calls, social media alerts that seemed to multiply even as she watched. Her hands trembled as she scrolled through them. Messages from family members, friends from school, her soccer coach teachers, people she'd met once at her father's company events. Everyone wanted to know if she was okay, wanted to express support or outrage or both. But it was the news alerts that made her stomach drop. Robert Henderson, fired from Henderson Financial following racist incident. Airline launches, investigation into discrimination against 11-year-old passenger. FBI investigating death threats against Caroline Williams. Video of black child's dignity in face of racism goes viral. 15 million views and counting. 15 million. Caroline couldn't even conceptualize that number. 15 million people had watched the worst moment of her life, had formed opinions about her, had shared it with their own followers in an exponentially expanding web of exposure. She scrolled further and found op-eds, think pieces, hot takes. Why Caroline Williams's story matters. The adultification of black girls. How an 11-year-old shouldn't have had to be so composed. When privilege meets prejudice. What the Williams case reveals about modern racism. Her life had become a case study, a hashtag, a national conversation. A soft knock on the door made her look up. "Caroline, you awake, baby?" Her father's voice gentle but concerned. "Yeah, come in." David entered carrying a tray with breakfast scrambled eggs, toast orange juice, and a small vase with a single sunflower. He set it on the bed beside her, his eyes searching her face. "How'd you sleep?" "Okay, I guess." Caroline gestured at her phone. "Have you seen all of this?" "I've seen it." David sat on the edge of the bed. "Henderson was terminated this morning. The airline's CEO issued a public apology and announced mandatory anti-bias training for all staff. Your story is on every major news outlet. The FBI made an arrest about 2 hours ago, some guy in Nevada who sent the threatening email. He's being charged with multiple federal crimes." Caroline should have felt victorious. Instead, she just felt overwhelmed. An arrest already. They traced his IP address. Turns out he'd been posting racist content online for years, had a history of threats against public figures. Your case was just the latest. David's expression hardened. "He's going to prison, Caroline. They take threats against children very seriously." "Good," Caroline said, and was surprised to find she meant it. The man who'd made her feel unsafe deserved consequences. But knowing he was caught didn't erase the fear he'd planted. "There's something else." David pulled out his own phone and showed her a video. It was from a morning news show, and the host was interviewing several of the passengers from Flight 2847. Jasmine was there, articulate and passionate as she described witnessing the confrontation. Professor Chen spoke about the legal implications. The young mother with daughters talked about using Caroline's example to teach her children about standing up to injustice. "They're calling you a hero," David said softly. "They're saying you did what adults should have done but didn't. They're saying you gave people hope." Caroline watched the interviews with a complicated mixture of pride and discomfort. "I wasn't trying to be a hero. I just wanted my seat." "I know, but sometimes heroes are just ordinary people who refuse to accept injustice." David paused, considering his next words carefully. "Caroline, we need to talk about what happens next. My legal team has prepared several options for how we can proceed." Over breakfast, he laid out the possibilities. They could pursue a civil rights lawsuit against the airline. They could file defamation charges against Henderson if he followed through on his threat to sue. They could do a carefully controlled interview with a major news outlet to tell Caroline's side of the story in her own words. Or they could retreat into privacy, let the lawyers handle everything quietly, and wait for the media storm to pass. "What do you think I should do?" Caroline asked. "What I think doesn't matter as much as what you want," David replied. "But if you're asking my opinion, I think you have an opportunity here to turn something horrible into something meaningful. Not because you owe anyone your story, but because your voice, your actual voice, not filtered through reporters or commentators, could make a real difference." Before Caroline could respond, the doorbell rang. Marcus's voice carried up from downstairs, conferring with someone. Then footsteps on the stairs, and Marcus appeared in the doorway. "Sir, someone's here to see you. Says it's urgent. I've confirmed her identity. She's legitimate." "Who?" David stood immediately protective. "Janet Morrison, CEO of the airline." The air seemed to leave the room. David's expression went carefully neutral, but Caroline could see the anger simmering beneath. "She came here to the safe house. She says she came alone. No press, no lawyers. She's asking for 5 minutes of your time." Marcus looked uncomfortable. "Sir, normally I'd have sent her away, but she seems genuinely broken up about this." David looked at Caroline. "Do you want to see her?" "You don't have to. You don't owe her anything." Caroline thought about it. Part of her wanted to refuse, wanted to make the woman who oversaw the company that had allowed such discrimination face the consequences of being shut out. But another part was curious. What could the CEO possibly say that would matter? 5 minutes, Caroline said. "But you stay with me, Daddy." They went downstairs to find a woman in her 60s, standing in the foyer, her expensive suit somehow looking rumpled despite being perfectly pressed. She had silver hair cut in a professional bob and eyes that were red-rimmed as if she'd been crying. When she saw Caroline, those eyes filled with fresh tears. "Miss Williams?" she said, her voice thick with emotion. "Mr. Williams, thank you for seeing me. I know I don't deserve even 5 minutes of your time." "No, you don't," David said coldly. "My daughter was discriminated against on your airline. She was nearly removed from a flight for the crime of being black in first class. Your staff sided with a racist liar over a child with proof. So no, Ms. Morrison, you don't deserve our time. You have 4 minutes left. Make them count." Janet Morrison flinched but nodded. She turned to Caroline directly. "I am so deeply, profoundly sorry for what happened to you. There is no excuse, none, for how my crew handled that situation. The policies that allowed it, the culture that enabled it, the training that failed to prevent it, all of that is on me. I've been CEO for 6 years, and I clearly haven't done enough to root out bias in our organization." "Clearly," David said icily. "I'm not here to make excuses or ask for forgiveness." Morrison continued, "I'm here to tell you both what I'm doing to make sure this never happens again. As of this morning, I've implemented mandatory anti-bias training for all employees, not the usual check-the-box training, but real substantive education developed with civil rights organizations. I've created a new position, Chief Diversity and Inclusion Officer, with direct reporting to me and real authority to make changes. I've established an independent review board to investigate discrimination complaints, and I'm personally reviewing our policies around how crew members handle seating disputes." "That's a good start," David said, his tone suggesting it was nowhere near enough. "What about Brenda and Margaret?" "Both terminated. Their actions violated our code of conduct and federal civil rights law. We're also reviewing their employment history to see if there were other incidents that were mishandled or covered up." Morrison's voice shook. "But Mr. Williams, Miss Williams, I need you to understand something. This isn't just about PR or avoiding lawsuits, though I won't insult you by pretending those aren't factors. This is about the fact that I built a company that allowed a child to be treated that way. That's a moral failure I'll carry for the rest of my career." Caroline studied the woman's face, looking for signs of performance of calculated corporate contrition. But all she saw was genuine anguish. "Why did it take this?" Caroline asked quietly. "Why did it take me standing up and the video going viral for these changes to happen? How many other people were discriminated against before me that nobody cared about?" Morrison's face crumpled. "I don't know. Too many, probably. And that's on me. I got comfortable, assumed our policies were sufficient, didn't dig deep enough to find the problems. You shouldn't have had to be the one to expose this, Miss Williams. You were failed by every adult in that situation who should have protected you." "Yes," Carolyn said simply. "I was." The stark acknowledgement seemed to hit Morrison like a physical blow. She nodded, tears running down her face now. "I know this doesn't change what happened to you. I know apologies are inadequate. But I want you to know that your courage, your refusal to accept that treatment, is going to make real changes, not just in my airline, but across the industry. Other carriers are already calling, asking about our new protocols, implementing their own reforms. You didn't just stand up for yourself. You stood up for everyone who'll fly after you." David's expression remained hard, but Caroline saw something flicker in his eyes. Recognition, perhaps, that Morrison's contrition seemed genuine. That meaningful change might actually come from this nightmare. 3 minutes are up," David said. "Is there anything else?" Morrison reached into her briefcase and pulled out an envelope. "This is a personal letter from me to Caroline. Not from the CEO to a passenger, but from one person to another. You don't have to read it. You can throw it away if you want. But I needed to write it, needed to say things that can't be said in a corporate statement." She handed it to Caroline, then looked at David. "I'm also prepared to offer a settlement. Not to buy your silence, any agreement would allow you to speak freely about what happened, but to compensate for the trauma, the disruption to your lives, the therapy Caroline will likely need. My lawyers are prepared to discuss terms whenever you're ready." "We'll be in touch," David said dismissively. "Through our attorneys. Now, if you'll excuse us. One more thing." Morrison's voice was urgent. "Robert Henderson is planning a press conference this afternoon. He's going to claim he's the real victim, that Caroline's father used his wealth and influence to destroy an innocent man over a simple misunderstanding. He's hired a crisis PR firm, and he's going on the offensive. Caroline felt ice in her stomach. Of course, Henderson wasn't going to accept consequences quietly. Of course, he'd try to flip the narrative, make himself the martyr. David's jaw clenched. "Thank you for the warning. We'll be ready." After Morrison left, father and daughter sat in the living room, the CEO's letter still clutched in Caroline's hand. David was already on his phone, texting rapidly with his legal team, preparing for Henderson's counterattack. "He's going to lie," Caroline said hollowly. "He's going to tell everyone I'm a spoiled rich kid who ruined his life over nothing." "He's going to try," David corrected. "But baby, we have something he doesn't. We have the truth. We have video evidence. We have witness testimony. We have the fact that he was actually demonstrably wrong about everything." He set down his phone and took Caroline's hands. "Henderson is desperate. Desperate people do desperate things, but this press conference is going to backfire on him spectacularly if we handle it right." "How do we handle it right?" David smiled, and there was steel in it. "We beat him at his own game. We give our own interview first. We control the narrative before he can poison it." Within an hour, the brownstone had transformed into a command center. Sarah Mitchell arrived with a team of advisors. David's head of communications for Williams Technologies set up in the dining room with laptops and phones. A crisis management specialist dialed in via video conference to discuss strategy. Caroline sat in the middle of it all, feeling surreal, as adults planned how to present her story, debated which journalist to grant an interview, to analyze the optics of every potential decision. "We need someone respected, someone who will ask fair questions but not softball her," Sarah said. "Someone whose audience will actually listen." "Oprah?" someone suggested. "Retired from regular interviews." "What about Gayle King?" "Good rapport with the black community, known for empathy but also asking tough questions." David's communications director said. "CBS. This morning would give us a huge platform." "Do it," David decided. "Reach out to her team. Tell them we need this to air before Henderson's press conference at 4. Caroline listened as phone calls were made, deals were negotiated, transportation was arranged. Everything was moving so fast, like a boulder rolling downhill, gathering momentum. She couldn't stop even if she wanted to. "Caroline," Sarah's voice cut through the chaos. "I need to prepare you for this interview. Gayle King is going to ask you some difficult questions. About how you felt when Henderson said those things. About the death threat. About whether you think the punishment fits the crime. You need to be ready." They spent the next 2 hours doing practice interviews. Sarah played Gayle, throwing questions at Caroline, while David watched critically, occasionally suggesting better ways to phrase responses. Caroline practiced staying calm, staying articulate, staying true to her experience, while also being mindful of how her words would be interpreted by millions of viewers. "Remember," Sarah coached, "you're not attacking Henderson. You're simply stating facts about what he did and said. Let the facts speak for themselves. Don't let emotion make you say something you'll regret." "But I am emotional," Caroline protested. "What happened to me was emotional." "Then express that emotion truthfully," Sarah said. "Tears are okay, anger is okay, but keep it focused on the experience, not on vengeance. You want people to empathize with you, not worry that you're being vindictive." By the time a car arrived to take them to the CBS studio in Manhattan, Caroline felt wrung out. Her father sat beside her in the back seat, his hand warm on her shoulder. "You don't have to do this," he said quietly. "Even now, even after all the preparation, you can change your mind. We can cancel the interview and handle this a different way." Caroline looked out the window at New York, streaming past pedestrians and storefronts, the everyday life of a city that had no idea her world had been turned upside down. Somewhere out there, people were watching videos of her forming opinions, choosing sides. Somewhere out there, other black children were facing their own Hendersons, their own moments of being questioned in spaces they had every right to occupy. "No," she said firmly. "I want to do this. I want people to hear my voice, not just see me as a viral video. I want to tell my own story." David squeezed her shoulder, pride evident in his eyes. The CBS building was a fortress of glass and steel. They were ushered in through a private entrance, avoiding the handful of photographers who'd gotten wind of their appearance. A production assistant led them to a green room where Caroline was introduced to a makeup artist who made gentle small talk while applying minimal makeup to Caroline's face. "Just a little to prevent shine from the lights," she explained. "We want you to look like yourself, just camera ready." Then Gayle King herself appeared, and Caroline was struck by how warm she seemed in person. Not the polished TV persona, but a real woman with kind eyes who crouched down to Caroline's level. "Hi, sweetheart," Gayle said. "I want you to know something before we start. I'm not here to make this harder on you. I'm here to give you a chance to tell your story in your own words. If at any point you need to stop, we stop." "Okay." "Okay," Caroline said, feeling some of her anxiety ease. "I'm going to ask some tough questions because that's my job, and because I want people to understand the full scope of what happened to you. But I'm on your side. I want you to know that." They were led onto a comfortable seating area, with soft lighting designed to feel intimate, despite the cameras and crew surrounding them. Caroline sat in a chair that felt too big, her feet barely touching the floor. Her father sat just off camera, where she could see him, his presence a lifeline. "We're recording in 3, 2, 1, Gayle began with gentle questions. How had Caroline's day started? What was she thinking as she boarded the plane? The questions were easy, designed to put her at ease, to let viewers see her as a real child, rather than just a viral video. Then, "Tell me what happened when you got to your seat." Caroline took a breath and told it. All of it. Henderson's dismissal, his racist implications, his refusal to check his boarding pass. The flight attendant's bias. The moment she called her father. The removal of Henderson from the flight. She kept her voice steady, stating facts, letting the story speak for itself. "How did it make you feel when he said people like you don't belong in first class?" Gayle asked gently. Caroline's eyes burned. "It made me feel small. Like no matter what I did, no matter how polite I was or how right I was, I would always be questioned. Always have to prove myself. Always be seen as not belonging. That's a heavy burden for an 11-year-old to carry." "It shouldn't be a burden at all," Caroline said, and heard her mother's strength in her own voice. "I had a ticket. I paid for that seat. Well, my dad did. I had every right to be there. But because I'm black, because I'm young, I had to fight for something that should have been simple." Gayle nodded, her expression compassionate. "Robert Henderson is giving a press conference later today. He's expected to say, you and your father orchestrated this situation to damage him. What's your response to that?" Caroline looked directly into the camera. "I didn't orchestrate anything. I boarded a plane and found someone in my seat. That's all. Everything that happened after that was because of his choices. His choice to refuse to check his ticket. His choice to make racist comments. His choice to try to have me removed instead of admitting he was wrong. I didn't ruin Robert Henderson's life. Robert Henderson ruined his own life by being racist and getting caught. Some people are saying the punishment is too harsh, that he lost his job over a mistake, a misunderstanding. It wasn't a misunderstanding," Caroline said firmly. "He knew he was in the wrong seat. When I asked him to check his ticket, he refused because he assumed I was lying. He assumed a black child couldn't possibly belong in first class. That's not a mistake. That's racism. And if racism costs you your job, that's not unfair punishment. That's consequences." Gayle asked about the death threat, and Caroline's composure cracked slightly. Tears slipped down her cheeks as she described the fear of reading those words, of knowing someone hated her enough to want to hurt her. "Do you feel safe now?" Gayle asked. "I don't know," Caroline admitted. "My dad hired extra security. We're staying somewhere secret. The FBI arrested the person who sent the threat. But there are probably others out there who feel the same way, who think I deserve to be punished for standing up for myself. So no, I don't feel completely safe, and that's scary." "What do you want people to take away from your story?" Caroline thought carefully. "I want people to understand that this isn't just about me. This happens to black people every day, being questioned in stores, being followed by security, being assumed to be in the wrong place. We're constantly having to prove we belong, and I want people, especially black children, to know that you do belong. Wherever you have a right to be, you belong there. Don't let anyone make you feel otherwise. The interview lasted 40 minutes. When it was over and the cameras stopped rolling, Gail hugged Caroline tightly. "You were extraordinary," she whispered. "Truly extraordinary." David wrapped Caroline in his arms as soon as they were off set. "I'm so proud of you, baby. You did beautifully." They were escorted back to the SUV through the same private entrance. As they pulled away from the building, David's phone buzzed with messages from his team who'd been watching the interview feed. "It's perfect," Sarah texted. She came across exactly right, strong but vulnerable, articulate but still a child. "This is going to air in 2 hours, and it's going to demolish Henderson's narrative before he can even start." Sure enough, when they returned to the safe house and turned on the television, Caroline's interview was the lead story on the afternoon news. Clips of her most powerful moments were already going viral. "I didn't ruin Robert Henderson's life. Robert Henderson ruined his own life by being racist and getting caught." At exactly 4 o'clock, they tuned in to Henderson's press conference. He stood at a podium in an expensive hotel flanked by lawyers, his face arranged in an expression of wounded innocence. "I am here today to address the false narrative that has been spread about me." He began, his voice quavering. "I am not a racist. I have never been a racist. What happened on that flight was a simple misunderstanding that has been blown out of proportion by a powerful family looking to play the victim." Caroline's hands clenched into fists. David put a steadying hand on her knee. Henderson continued painting himself as the victim of a wealthy family's manipulation, claiming the videos were edited to make him look worse, suggesting Caroline had been coached to provoke him. But his words rang hollow, especially after viewers had just seen Caroline's interview, had heard her speak with such clear honesty about her experience. The questions from reporters were brutal. "Mr. Henderson, video shows you refusing to check your boarding pass. How is that a misunderstanding? Mr. Henderson, multiple witnesses confirmed you made racist statements. Are they all lying? Mr. Henderson, Caroline Williams is 11 years old. Are you really claiming she orchestrated a conspiracy against you?" Henderson's composure cracked. His face reddened. He snapped at reporters, blamed the media for destroying his reputation, claimed he was the real victim of discrimination against white men, against successful people, against those who dared to question the race card. It was, Caroline realized with a mixture of satisfaction and sadness, exactly what her father had predicted. Henderson was so desperate to avoid accountability that he was making himself look worse with every word. The press conference ended in chaos, with Henderson storming off as reporters shouted questions. Within minutes, social media exploded with mockery and condemnation. The stark contrast between Caroline's dignified interview and Henderson's defensive rant couldn't have been clearer. David's phone rang. He answered, listened, then smiled. That was Sarah. Henderson's crisis PR firm just dropped him as a client. They're not willing to be associated with him after that performance. Over the next days, the story continued to evolve. The FBI announced additional charges against the man who'd threatened Caroline, revealing he was part of an online network of extremists. The airline published its new anti-discrimination protocols, citing Caroline's case as the catalyst for change. Several other passengers came forward with their own stories of discrimination on flights, launching a broader conversation about bias in travel. Most significantly, several major corporations announced they were cutting ties with Henderson Financial, or what remained of it. His consulting contracts were canceled. His professional reputation was in ruins. His attempt to portray himself as the victim had backfired completely. 3 days after the incident, Caroline was finally able to return to her own home. The protesters had dispersed. The news vans had moved on to other stories. While her face was still recognizable, and the story would follow her for a while, the initial frenzy had passed. Her school had offered to let her finish the semester remotely if she wanted, but Caroline had declined. She needed normalcy, needed to be around her friends, needed to be reminded that she was still just Caroline, not just a symbol or a hashtag. On her first day back, she was nervous. Would kids treat her differently? Would teachers look at her with pity? Would she forever be that girl from the viral video? But when she walked into her classroom, her friends swarmed her with hugs and excited questions. Her teacher, Ms. Rodriguez, simply smiled and said, "Welcome back, Caroline. We missed you." During lunch, a girl from the grade above a black girl Caroline had seen around but never really talked to, approached her table. "Hey, Caroline," she said shyly. "I just wanted to say thank you. My mom and I were at a restaurant last month and the hostess assumed we were there to apply for jobs, not to eat. I didn't say anything because I was embarrassed. But after seeing what you did, I realized I should have said something. So next time, and there will be a next time, unfortunately, I'm going to speak up because of you." Caroline felt tears prick her eyes. "I'm glad," she managed. "We deserve to be heard." Other kids shared similar stories throughout the day. A Latino student who'd been followed around a store. An Asian student who'd been complimented on their English despite being born in New York. A white student who'd witnessed discrimination and stayed silent, but now understood why speaking up mattered. Caroline's story had given them all permission to acknowledge these experiences, to name them as wrong, to demand better. That evening, Caroline sat in her room, her real room, with her posters and books, and the comfortable familiarity of home, and opened the letter Janet Morrison had given her. She'd been afraid to read it, afraid it would just be more corporate speak dressed up as personal sentiment. But the letter was handwritten, not typed, and it was raw. "Dear Caroline," it began, "I don't know if you'll ever read this. I don't know if I deserve to have you read it. But I need to write it anyway. I need you to know that I see you. Not as a PR problem or a lawsuit or a viral video. I see you as an 11-year-old girl who should have felt safe on my airline and didn't. Who should have been protected by my staff and wasn't. Who had to be braver and stronger than any child should have to be, because the adults around you failed. I have a granddaughter your age. Watching those videos, imagining her in your place, has broken something in me. Made me realize how comfortable I'd gotten, how much I'd been willing to overlook in the name of business as usual. You changed that. You changed me. I know that doesn't undo what happened to you. But I want you to know that your courage is going to make real differences for real people. And I will spend the rest of my career trying to be worthy of the lesson you taught me. With deepest respect and regret, Janet Morrison." Caroline folded the letter carefully and set it aside.